2008, I didn't own anything. All the properties during that crash, I lost everything. I had to start over. I basically just did rental arbitrage. I would rent a property for $1,000 a month, put it on Airbnb and make $3,000 a month. There's no other model in real estate that you create cash flow, within a couple weeks, especially with almost no money out of pocket. So it's just a great model. There's no business like that I know of. Most businesses, you're not profitable for many months or maybe not even in the first year. And this is something that most anybody can do. It's not a super complicated business to do.
I need to start building a different stream of revenue because I've gotten into so much debt. And I said, I just want to flip one house, maybe a year, maybe two, start building a different stream of income because there's 1.5 million different avenues in real estate, right? But that was the one that I really, really wanted to focus on. And I was just so fascinated by it and also the limitless opportunity and flexibility that it provided. So I just said, I'm just going to go for it. And what that turned into was me hiring a coach, making almost $100,000 on that. It was honestly the smartest thing I ever did.
There's three major problems with flipping houses. You got to find the deals, you got to find the money, and then you've got to figure out how to rehab them and fix them up. So I almost had unlimited deals and money without ever figuring that part out. And so that's what I've been building for the last 5 years. The question I always get is, how do you find your deals? Like there's some secret to doing it. We've got the MLS, and you've got Zillow, and you've got for sale by owners. So I think an abundance mindset is key. Because one of the things I learned doing everything the hard way is there's always more deals, there's always more money.
Welcome to episode 2 of Hacking Real Estate. So we're still on the front end here, just getting started. Excited for you to be here right now. This is one of those series that can literally make a significant difference in your life. There's so much content here that can take you to places that you haven't even considered right now when it comes to your future, your financial future, your freedom, your sense of life in general. Can all be massively and positively impacted through learning how to properly invest in real estate. We are just starting episode 2, and this is the free viewing period. And my one request of you right now is that you share this. Let other people know about this series. Our goal is to get this out to as many people as we possibly can. Invite them to come see this information, to learn from it, to experience it, to change their lives with it, and it's all free. So we're here in the free viewing period. What's in that for you is that you can create a study buddy, someone that you can literally go through this process with, have this journey together, share your notes, discuss it, and when you do that, the impact of the series will be more than double. So thanks for being here. Let's jump into episode 2. Next up, James here, interviewed Brian Page. Now, Brian is somebody that I've had conversations with before. Great guy. What was your interview like? How did you experience him?
He was fascinating. This is a guy who's come up with an idea never would have occurred to me. He is all about Airbnbs. But what was fascinating, Patrick, he has 1,000 Airbnbs and doesn't own one of them. He gets other people's properties. So it's just, I don't want to spoil it. Fascinating way to look at getting involved in real estate. And he has helped thousands of people kill it in this market.
Would you say that this is one of the ways where people say, well, I don't have a lot of capital or I don't have a lot of money to invest, that they can get started through his mechanisms?
Definitely, and I'm one of those people that's jumping on what he had to teach us.
So personally this one resonated.
Yeah, very much.
Great, so enjoy this interview with Brian Page.
Brian, thanks so much for taking time. I'm really fascinated to talk to you because there's so many niches to real estate, and you picked and became an expert in a specific one. So I don't want to spoil it. If you would, tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got into it, and we'll go from there.
Certainly. Well, I got into real estate right out of college. It was the very first thing that I did. I started flipping properties and buying and renting properties and doing kind of the traditional model. And Actually, that's kind of how I supported myself right out of school. I was a full-time investor. I've done real estate investing ever since then. I got into short-term rentals a few years ago, specifically Airbnb. And now I have a Airbnb business as well as a coaching business and several other ventures that I do in real estate.
All right, when you say Airbnb, that you really kind of developed a specific niche. What moved you from short-term rental to Airbnb?
Well, it was around, it was around 2017. I was living in California for a few years, decided to come back to Charleston, and that's where I live now. And I was looking for a way to start over in real estate because I'd gone through the 2008 crash. And prior to that, I had millions of dollars in real estate. I lost it all in the crash and didn't have the ability to buy property. So I was trying to look for a non-traditional way to make money and create cash flow. And I'd heard about Airbnb. I was doing it with a spare room in my apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment that I had. And through the idea of a chance encounter with a stranger on a plane, he suggested that I start leveraging other people's properties. So I started leasing a bunch of properties, putting them on Airbnb, and then started building a really big business doing it that way. That's kind of how I got started. I eventually started teaching what I know to other people. And now I have over 100,000 customers and 10,000 people in my direct training around the world, 43 different countries. And I've helped all kinds of people start their own Airbnb business.
So this 2017 is not that long ago. That's when you started this?
Yeah. Well, actually, I was doing Airbnb a little bit before that, but I really went full time around that time. And just a few years ago, launched my online course and my online education. And now we do coaching where we work directly with people in wherever they live to help them get their own listings on Airbnb.
Congratulations. That's quite a success story. So when you first got into Airbnb, were you buying properties and doing Airbnb or?
No, I didn't have any properties at the time. So after 2008, I didn't own anything. All the properties during that crash, I lost everything. Had to start over. So I basically just did rental arbitrage. I would rent a property for $1,000 a month, put it on Airbnb and make $3,000 a month. And so I was getting permission from the owners to do this. Of course, it was all with their blessing. And I was able to do that and get one property per month and start building, a nice, healthy, multiple 6-figure income. And then what I found is that as people started asking me to teach them how to do it, that I realized that other people could do it pretty much anywhere in the world because Airbnb is a global company and it's a global opportunity.
So you're not buying properties?
Well, I am. I do own properties now again. I am now owning properties, and some of the listings that I have, I do own, but the majority I do not. The majority are leases or lease options. We like to do lease options as well.
So what made you think you could go to somebody and say, hey, can I rent your property for $1,000 and I'm going to go over here and make $2,000?
I was coming from the investment world myself, being a real estate investor. Whenever, I was right out of college buying these properties and renting them out, there was really only 2 things I cared about. I cared about if somebody's going to pay the rent on the property on time and if they were going to take care of the property. And if they could do those 2 things, I would generally rent them. So when I met owners in person, I would just communicate to them that, look, I want to lease your property just like anyone else does. The only difference is I'm not going to live here. And some owners said no, some said yes, but I just saw it as a numbers game. The more people I talked to, the more yeses I'd get and the more properties I'd get.
What was the advantage you saw of doing Airbnb versus just rental properties?
Yeah, there's a lot of advantages. Doing the short-term model, first of all, for most people who have no residential real estate or no investment real estate, to be able to jump in and make money almost immediately within a 24 to 48 hours, you can start seeing bookings come in on the site. I don't know any other model in real estate where you can make cash flow immediately or within the first week or 2. And so there's very low startup costs because really all you need is first month's rent and a deposit if it's a furnished property, or maybe a little bit more money if you're going to furnish it. So very little money to get in versus say 20% down for a typical property, which could be tens of thousands of dollars. You don't have to have credit. You don't have to take on any debt personally. There's all kinds of advantages. You also don't have any of the major repairs. Those are going to still be the responsibility of the owner. And then to top it off, you don't have to worry about evictions because you never have to evict with Airbnb guests. And of course, we know that's a huge, huge challenge right now in real estate with owners that can't evict tenants that aren't paying currently. So there's all kinds of advantages to not owning, although I'm still a believer that you should own real estate. This is a model to get started quickly. And I think it's a blend of the two is a really good way to go.
Let's go back for a moment. If you can remember the first person you approached to see if you could rent, and then could we call it a sublease or?
It's not a sublease because a sublease means that you're putting someone else in place who's then going to pay the rent. Since there's no additional contract, there's no additional agreement with a guest staying there, that's not a sublease. So technically it's not a sublease. And I explained this to the owners, but basically I just found a little 1-bedroom apartment. It was behind somebody's house, it was attached to their house, 1 bedroom with its own entrance. The lady had a for rent sign in the front yard. I just approached her and I said, can I look at your place? And when we went to the back and looked at the apartment, I said to her, this sounds really crazy, but can I rent your property and then have short-term guests stay here? And she had never heard of Airbnb. She didn't know what it was. She didn't care. She just was going based on me and, you know, what she thought about me. And she said, I want to think about it. Sounds kind of unusual, but she got back to me a few days later and she said, I'll do this with you. And so I rented that property. In the very first month, I netted, after all expenses, about $1,600. And it made between $1,300 and $2,000 a month every month thereafter. And that was a tremendous amount of cash flow compared to when I owned properties and listed them and made $200 cash flow. So the short-term model is way, way higher income. And it's really the simplest way to explain it for anybody who's not familiar is it's the same game that hotels play. So hotels have a mortgage that they got to pay on their property, but they rent out by the night, which allows them to create, essentially take something wholesale and sell it retail. So you're taking the month and you're selling the days. And so that's the model that I used, and that's the model that I teach.
It sounds kind of simple, which I know it can't be. But so let's go back to that first property. When you went to her, did you negotiate down the rent she was looking for, or did the numbers work?
No, I didn't negotiate it down. No, because I knew I could make a couple $100 a night or more on that property. So I was happy to pay what she was asking. And there's been times where I paid more than an owner is asking. So if I have an owner that's got a property and let's say it's $1,500 a month and he's on the fence, then I'll say, what if I gave you $1,600 a month? And that little $100 difference doesn't make much difference to me because I know what the property potential is, but to the owner, it might make all the difference in the world. So I've been known to do that at times, is to pay over market a little bit to get the property. So the great thing about it is you can have a little bit of wiggle room there. And my whole goal is to kind of make it a win-win for the owner and for me. The owner loves it because their property is cleaned several times a week professionally. I mean, it's kept in absolute pristine condition. They can get in anytime they want to see the property because there's vacancies in between. You know, I go above and beyond. I even take care of minor repairs. So anything under $100, I usually cover, my team covers. So it's a great for them. And every owner I've worked with always says, my property's never been kept to the kind of condition that you're keeping these properties in, because it's the business, right? If you don't keep it in excellent condition, you're not going to have good reviews from your guests, and you're not going to make more money. So it's great. It's a great model all around. And some owners want to do it themselves, but a lot of times I find owners just don't want to do it. So they'll let people like me essentially take their property and list it.
Yeah, it sounds incredible because as I'm listening to you, as the homeowner, your standards are higher than most people are just going to rent, right?
Yeah, and a lot of the problems are caused by tenants. So there's a big difference between guests and tenants because, for example, if somebody has their dog in the backyard and it digs up the yard over the course of several months, that's not going to be a guest. That's going to be a long-term tenant. Somebody has a car in the driveway that doesn't run anymore, you know, or starts destroying the property or painting one of the bedrooms a weird color. None of that stuff is going to happen with somebody who's staying 2 nights in the property. So when I educate the owners and I say, all those problems that you've had in the past, they're gone because you're now dealing with me and I'm a professional and I'm not going to be living in the property. Nobody's going to be living in the property. And when people don't live in the property, they treat it very differently when they're a guest versus somebody who says, this is my property and you're not coming in here and I'm going to do whatever I feel like doing for the year or two that I'm living here. So it's a very different mentality. And that's why guests take better care of the property than tenants do. And once I educate owners on that, then they're thrilled. And the really exciting thing is there's a model that you can do where it doesn't involve any leasing at all. So no lease, no long-term agreement, not having to come up with a deposit, first month's rent, any of that stuff, which is where you're just partnering with the owner. So, and that's a really cool model. So I just say to you, instead of renting this to me for $1,500, what if we put it on Airbnb and made $4,000 a month and we just split it 50-50? You know, is there any downside to that? And if you don't like it, I'll walk away in 30 days or 60 days. So it's a really good model for owners to partner with them as well. And that's for somebody that has zero money. So you could technically get in this business for no money and partner on a deal and immediately start profiting.
So in that model, you're coming to me, the owner, and basically offering to increase my rent.
Increase your cash flow on the property, yeah, with no extra work on your part.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're increasing my cash flow. You're taking better care of the property. And so what you're doing is managing all that.
For you. Yeah. So let me give you a scenario. So let's say you're renting a property for $1,500 a month. I come to you and say, I think it has potential to do much, much more than that on Airbnb. So let's say we make $4,000 a month with the property. You get two, so you make $500 more for no extra work, and I get two on a property that I don't own, that I didn't sign a lease for. So it's an incredible model. And I could even go so far as to say, I'll guarantee you your $1,500. So the first $1,500 that comes in, you still get that. So you're not going to make less than you normally would. But the upside is that you can make, substantially more, 20, 30% more without any extra work. And then there's no commitment for the owner. Anytime they can walk, anytime I can walk, there's no lease, it's just, we'll do this as long as it works for both of us. So it's a really good model. You can even ask the owners to pay for the furnishings. That's a model that my students use. They might go to the owner and say, I'll partner with you, but you need to put the furnishings in the house and get it ready. And then once it's ready, then I'll manage it and we'll reimburse you for the furnishings and everything. But after that, we just split everything. So it's a great model. You can actually get the owners to pay for the furniture. There's many owners that want to do this, but they don't want to do the day-to-day. They don't want to manage it. And they just kind of want to be hands-off. So like I said, there's no other model in real estate that you could do that. There's no model that I know of that you can create cash flow, within a couple of weeks, 2 or 3, 4 weeks, especially with almost no money out of pocket. So it's just a great model. There's no business like that I know of. Most businesses, you're not profitable for many months or maybe not even within the first year. And this is something that anybody can do. It's not a super complicated business to do.
What costs do you incur?
As the person hosting?
So you've come to me and you're going to take my property, pay me, again, benefits for me. I'm getting paid. My property's being taken care of. What are your costs?
Okay, that's a good question. So when you have a property like this, then you're going to have to pay for utilities. So that can generally run, let's say 10%, 15%, maybe a little bit more of whatever the rent is. So on a $1,500 property, $150 to $250 a month in utilities, something like that. We're talking about, let's say, a 1-bedroom apartment, not a big place. So you're going to have to pay for utilities, and then you're going to have to pay for the cleanings. You're going to have a cleaning company come in and do cleanings, but the cleanings are charged to the guest. So it's really not something that comes out of our pocket at all, because if the cleaning's $100, we just charge it straight to the guest. So there's really not much. I mean, there's just the cost of paying for the utilities, which can be done in a night or two. So it's still very, very profitable. So like I said, the average student, I would say, nets about equal to the rent. So if it's $1,500 a month, you could net close to about $1,500 after all expenses, which is considerable when you think about it. And that's about the same numbers on my first listing. So that gives you an idea of the potential. And if you're making $1,500 a month in your pocket, it doesn't take very many listings to where you could replace your income. We're talking a handful of properties, and I have students that are doing well over 6 figures a year with 4 or 5 properties. Some doing it with 1 property. I have properties that have done over 6 figures in a year, single properties. So the potential is huge, especially as you start going up into luxury properties.
I know my wife's off camera furiously taking notes, and I know we're going to be having this conversation.
Yeah.
So when you did the first property, how fast did you scale up, and what were difficulties?
Well, I scaled up really fast. I got 1 property per month for about 8 months. I did 6 figures the first 6 months, over 300,000 the first year, and I've grown it since then. And it all happened within the first 6 months. I mean, I was doing Airbnb prior to that, but when I started, from the time I got my first lease, it was only 6 months. And I would say the average student, I like to talk about my path, but what's more important is to talk like the average person's path. So the average student that has gone through our program, that's worked with us, usually gets 2 to 3 listings in the first, say, 3 to 4 months. So, it depends on people's goals. So people might want to get a lot more than that. But once you get around 2 or 3 or 4 listings, you're talking about a considerable amount of income, at least enough to equal like a full-time job. So, and we help people as they scale to be able to start automating all that. Because once you start getting a bunch of properties, it gets a lot more complex. So you have to understand how to manage and build systems.
As you start to scale up, get 4, 5, 6 properties, you mentioned full-time job.
Yeah.
Am I trading full-time jobs? I mean, what kind of...
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, well, no. The thing is, as I started building my business, I would say about a year in, I figured out how to automate everything. So I wasn't even dealing with the communicating with the guests. Like I wasn't doing the messaging, I wasn't doing the cleaning, I wasn't doing the managing. To this day, I'm almost 99% hands off on everything on my Airbnb business. I'm totally hands off. So I teach people how to automate. So for a very small fraction percentage of your revenue, you can actually get people and services and VAs and people like that to manage everything for you. So that's the key. So I was only working a few hours a week. And that was when I essentially felt like I was kind of back to where I was originally in real estate, where I had enough cash flow to be out of the rat race, so to speak. So I didn't have a job. I actually quit my full-time job that I had at the time and was just living off my Airbnbs and traveling the world and enjoying the lifestyle. So that's the goal for everybody. I don't want people to do this and then be, working 40 hours a week. That's not the idea.
So automation, and you help people design. Did you design it?
I help them build it all out. So the B&B formula is just walking them through everything from locating to listing it online to getting more listings and then automating the whole process. So building a portfolio, I guess you could say. So I like working with people that aren't looking to just do one or two. They want to build a big business, and that's what we do.
After you got your first one, how did you start building your portfolio? What do you do? What you just go out and look for
just went out and looked for places for lease, just anything for lease. So I started in my local area, and then eventually I worked with my partner to get properties in Arizona. So now I have properties in other states like Phoenix, Arizona area. And so we started getting properties, different scales, like low income to medium to high income properties. So I've had everything from low income areas that aren't particularly super nice, but they're very profitable, up into, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million properties. So higher end, luxury properties. So that's kind of what I did. I just looked for anything that was available for lease, that was vacant, preferably furnished if I could find it. And that's what I try to teach people, to look for furnished properties first.
Like I can see a property on the beach or in the mountains, a ski resort being, like, okay, that can Airbnb. Not a lot of skiing and beaches in Arizona. I mean, what do you look for? What makes you think this would work as an Airbnb?
Yeah, that's the biggest misconception, is that this whole business is sometimes called vacation rentals when you think of like VRBO. And people think that they have to be in a vacation area in order to make it work. But that's actually not the case, because what you're looking for is not people vacationing. You're looking for people that need short-term places to stay. And the easiest way to determine where people stay short-term is to look where hotels are located. And so if I said to you, what towns have hotels? You would say, well, every town has a hotel. I mean, even on the side of the highway where there is no town, there's hotels. And that's because people are paying and need a place to stay there for whatever reason. It could be any number of reasons. They could be going to a place for a job, visiting family, going to a wedding, going to a college, that they're staying at. I mean, it could be millions of different reasons why people stay in hotels. And the hotel industry spends, millions of dollars per property to research and place these properties and build them out. And they're only doing that because people are paying money to stay there. So basically the thing that I teach is, if you have a hotel near you, that means there are guests there. That means there are people there. And Airbnb is an established company now. It's been around for a long time. And so we've seen that it works in just about any size town, anywhere in the world, pretty much. That's not restricted. I think it's restricted just a handful of countries. And I've got students in very, very small towns that are doing well. We're talking like under 10,000 people. I've got a couple students that do cabins. Got a gentleman in North Carolina that was working in a steel mill his entire life. He started getting hunting cabins for a couple $100, $200, $300, $400 each. And he listed them on Airbnb. He's making thousands per cabin. Middle of nowhere hunting cabins. And that's how he makes his money. I got other students in rural Texas that are making a killing, for people that want that ranch experience, want to be out in the country. So you don't have to be even in a major metro area to make it work. So in fact, I just saw the article, the number one most popular booked Airbnb, the Airbnb with the most guests ever, is a treehouse. It's a treehouse in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere. And the lady has more bookings than anyone ever in the history of the site. So, and it's a 300 square foot treehouse. So, and I'm sure that's very profitable, because how much can it cost to build a treehouse? And she's had it for many, many years. So it's probably a cash cow, and she charges a lot for it considering what it is. So yeah, it works pretty much everywhere. There are a few cities that are restricted. And so we coach students on how to avoid those cities and go around them. So if you're in, for example, Manhattan, you're not going to do it in Manhattan, but you could certainly go over to New Jersey and do it, across the river, other places where it's not restricted. So we teach people how to work within the system and and the rules.
So again, congratulations how well that you figured this out. On the way from first property to 20, mistakes made along the way? Lessons learned?
Yeah, definitely. I early on, I did get one property and I didn't get express permission from the owner to list it. And that was a big mistake. I've had students that have said, should I just do this and not tell the owner? Well, I learned the hard way and I had to fess up and I had to basically back out of the property. But I realized that I should have been upfront about it. And so I always tell people, don't do that. And I've never had to do that since. So I've always been very much the mindset that the owner is a partner with me. And I want to make sure that they trust me and they know what I'm doing and all that kind of stuff. And so I always teach people that you should always get the permission of the owner before you do this to their property, so that they're fully 100% on board. People still don't listen. They try to do it, but eventually the owners find out. So you want to make sure you have the owners on board. Besides that, I would say without a system, you will go crazy. You have to have a system because once you start getting over like 6, 7 properties, it gets a little bit insane. So you don't want to create more stress in your life. So you have to understand that you're building a business is different than just getting listings. You have to actually build a machine and a business that makes sense. So those are the 2 things that I would say are the most important things that I learned.
What are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of my students. I think a lot of times people want to talk about and brag about what they've done in whatever arena they're in. They want to talk about all the successes they've had. And I've had successes in many different arenas. But I'm especially with my online business and teaching people how to do this. But I'd much rather talk about my students, because my students, a lot of them have never had real estate experience. A lot of them have never even owned a business. And a lot of them are desperate to get out of a job that they hate, or get one of the spouses to come home and not have to work a 2 income household. Some of them didn't have a retirement plan. I've got students in their 70s that had no plan for retirement. And within a few months, they got listings on Airbnb and said that I saved their retirement, and this idea saved their retirement. So I've got teenagers doing this, people with literally no education of any kind, no formal education, no credit, no money, and they're doing this. So that makes me most proud, is to see people say, oh my gosh, this actually works. And I did it. And this is actually working for me. And so that's really exciting. Or I just quit my job. I made a goal and I did it and I achieved my goal, and I'm quitting my job today. And I'm so thrilled. And I have so much more time now. I'm making the same amount or more, but I only work a few hours a day, a couple hours a day now to manage my properties, and they love it. So it's really exciting to see people's lives, changed concretely.
That's a beautiful answer. Thank you. There's a million real estate courses out there, online books.
Yeah, I've taken most of them.
Okay. Why is yours succeeding in this way? What'd you build differently that you've got students who really, like you said, just within 3 months are moving?
Yeah, because it works. It works. I mean, the thing is that, as far as I know now, this is the best-selling course of its kind in the entire world. It's one of the best-selling courses of all time for real estate as well. When I built the course, I didn't try to learn the business and then go teach it. I actually was doing it. So I was doing the business, and then I was writing down and building an outline based on what I had just done the previous year, and said, how could I teach this? And so I taught it from experience, and I taught it in a very simple way. Just follow this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Most courses don't do that. They're just very vague. They don't tell you what to do next. This was really specific. Do this and do only this. Don't deviate. And if you do this, you'll succeed. And so really the people that don't succeed, they just don't really put in the work. They're not willing to actually go do it. But those who follow it are successful. So I think that's it. It's just the simplicity and specificity and telling people exactly how to do it. And so that's led to other opportunities. I'm now getting into the commercial real estate space, actively working on commercial deals, multifamily, like big apartment deals, that kind of thing. That's the direction I'm going in now. And that's something I might eventually teach one day, is to help people get into that space once I understand it fully and I'm an expert on that as well. So I'm excited about that. We're looking to acquire some big properties here in the next couple of years.
Do you get some real consistent questions from students?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I know what the main questions are that people have. I mean, they haven't changed much over the years. One of the questions that's new now, though, is this new economy that we're in, and everything that's going on, with the pandemic and all these things that have changed the landscape. And there was a rough patch there where things kind of stopped for a while and nobody was traveling. Although now that travel has opened up again and demand is just off the charts, Airbnb is actually producing record profits. The stock keeps climbing. I mean, Airbnb has had a better year than ever in its history. So the growth is there, and now the opportunity is back again. And so I think anybody who has any doubts about that, if they just saw what's happened over the last 6 months or 9 months, it's definitely the opportunity is better and bigger than ever. And more and more people are continuing to travel, and especially now, people don't have to go into an office. The remote working is going to be a more permanent thing, and because of that, you're going to have millions and millions more people that aren't going to go into an office, which means they could go anywhere. They could travel anywhere. They could go somewhere for a week or a month or 3 months and work from there, which is going to put even more pressure on more listings are going to be needed. And actually, the CEO of Airbnb, his name is Brian Chesky. He recently, just a couple weeks ago, in the Wall Street Journal, he said they have a desperate need for hosts on the site because the demand is just off the charts. So it's just an incredible opportunity for anybody that wants to get into it now.
And aren't there like 4 million hosts already out there?
There's several million right now, but this was a couple of years ago, the growth, and I don't know where it is now, but the growth was that there were like hundreds of thousands of people, new people per week, that were signing up every single week to use Airbnb for the very first time. So brand new people. And that trend is now accelerating again. And we're just seeing lots of people that have heard about it, but never actually used it to travel. So the demand is still exceeding the number of travelers, is far exceeding the number of hosts.
All right. So it's definitely not a saturated market.
No, not a saturated market. It's a huge opportunity for people. And most of the people don't realize this. A lot of the listings on Airbnb are not available full time.
So I'm glad you brought it up, because I was really curious how you survived the lockdowns and travel restrictions. And then when you said what you went through in 2008, was there a little bit of here we go again, even a different type of crisis? But
no, it felt very similar in a lot of ways. Because the stock market was crashing. We didn't have banks melting down, but there was some danger of that happening. It felt very similar to me. I'm in a different position now than I was in 2008. In 2008, I had a lot of personal debt. I'm debt free now. I was in a position where I was highly leveraged. I owned a lot of property, but I was highly leveraged, and it was just a very bad place to be for an unseen event. And so I've learned from that experience, and I'm in a place now where, it was our revenue dropped quite a bit in our Airbnbs. We just kind of had a holding pattern for a little while. And then things came roaring back. And so that was true of a lot of my students as well. We just kind of had a holding pattern for a while where we were trying to just ride out the storm. So I feel like I'm try to be prepared for anything at this point, especially after going through that. So I felt like I was well prepared. We don't know what the future holds. There's always, some things that we can't predict. But I think that, people creating multiple streams of income, multiple sources of income is a very smart thing to do, especially when their jobs could vaporize like many people's jobs did during the pandemic.
Yeah, very true. And that's why this is so intriguing, because it seems the barrier of entry is pretty low. Like, what would you tell somebody?
It's very low, and it's a simple business model. Going through, all the craziness of the last year and a half or two, just reminded me that it's good to have diversity in your income and also diversity in your investing and the different things you're investing into, which is one of the reasons why I'm looking at other, I invest in many different asset classes. One of them being commercial real estate, and the direction I'm going with that. So, I think a lot of people, they may have a job that they love. They might already be doing certain things or have a business that they love, but this offers something else they can do on the side, where they can create another source for themselves, and doesn't take an enormous amount of time to be able to do that.
That's the intriguing thing. If somebody wants to get into this, what would you want their financial situation to be? Like, should I have X amount of cash to play with? I know you said you could get in without any, but ideally, what should somebody's, like at the bottom end, look like?
Well, the more money you have, the easier it is to go fast. That's just the true of just about any. We also do work with people directly one-on-one. So what we do is we have a series of coaches that are all currently doing 6 or multiple 6 figures on Airbnb, and we partner them up with new students, and they help the new students to go get their first listings. And we walk them through how to do that. And we do a whole bunch of different things. We even help them find specific properties to go talk to the owners and get them on board. And so we do all that so we can actually work with people if they want to get going really fast. So it all just depends on how quickly you want to go and what you have to start with, but generally not a lot of money, not compared to any other way of doing real estate where you're going to have to come up with, I think the typical property now is $200,000-$300,000. So 20% down, $40,000 to $60,000 down just to get the first property. It's just not a model most people can do over and over again before they run out of cash.
I really like, it sounds like your coaching staff has been culled from people who have done well. So again, people who are doing it.
They're all students of mine, but it's great because there's only one of me and it's time. And so I don't do much one-on-one anymore. And so I put together a rock star team that helps people do that and are really passionate about helping people do that. So that's what we get a kick out of now. It's just seeing people get results really, really fast. And we try to take out any of the thinking. There's no thinking involved. It's just doing. Just go do what the simple steps that we tell you to do, and you'll be successful.
I'm good at the no thinking part. So, so you've systematized, right? You've created processes for all this to work. Because I can see you start to get a handful of properties and up. Yeah. I'm not interested in trading a 40-hour a week for a 70-hour week. What, just an overview of what are those systems and what are they and what do they do for you?
It's basically a to Z. So everything from locating the properties to putting them online and listing them and staging them so they're ready, with furnishings and all that kind of thing, to scaling it, to automating everything so you can start taking your hands off and not having to do the day-to-day. And then building that to 6 to 7 figures. That's kind of the goal we try to shoot for most people, is to get at least over 6 figures a year with our coaching program. And so what we do is we ask people to apply, talk to our team if they want to apply to work with us. They can just go to freebnbcall.com, freebnbcall.com, and then it's a free call and they can talk to us. And for the right people, because we're only working with a certain number of people in each metro area, for the right people, we'll actually help them through a series of one-on-one calls, just like this call we're doing here. And then they also get a chance to get on a call with me once a month where I can answer any other questions that they have. And then we just work with them. But once they do that, they're generally on their way and they're understanding about how to start scaling their business. So that's kind of what we do. That's kind of our model now.
That's a really quick ramp up.
Oh yeah, it is. Like I said, it does not take long. It took me 6 months to quit my job, and I had a 6-figure job, and I replaced that income within 6 months. I've seen it done time and time and time and time again. It's not particularly special by my students. So some don't have that goal. Some are like, I'd be happy with an extra 30, 40,000 a year, or I'm just trying to replace my wife's income. That's all I want to do, and if I could do that, I'm happy. So people have different goals, but it's very quite feasible for most people.
Well, and like you said, I'm with you. I believe you need to diversify, because one of the things we learned in the last couple of years is that whatever you have can go away for a variety of unseen reasons.
Yep, exactly.
Now you mentioned you have clients out of the country?
I do. I've got clients in 43 different countries, and probably more than that. That's the last count. It was 43 different countries. So, but Airbnb is in 180 countries.
Did you market overseas, or how did they find you?
No, not actively. No, just word of mouth, and it just kind of grew. I would say most of them are US, Canada, and Australia, and then somewhat in the UK. The rest are just other random countries, Vietnam and India and places like that.
Do you have US based clients who have overseas properties?
Yes, I do have a few. That I do have clients who have gotten listings in other places that they've traveled to. I've got customers who have got listings in Central America, for example. Like they go down to Costa Rica and get a listing, and then they get it for very little because down there the rents are very, very low. And then they end up renting the property to Americans that are going there and using Airbnb, which is kind of ironic, but they can be quite profitable if you know how to do it.
And I'm sure it's different in all markets, but what kind of occupancy rate do you need to get monthly to ensure you're on the profitable side of things? So occupancy, generally you don't need a lot of days to be able to cover that rent on the property. What I look for is, does the property make enough on the weekends to pay for the rent? So just on Fridays and Saturdays, those are going to be your most profitable days. And if on those 8 days per month you can cover the rent, then everything above and beyond that is going to be profit for you. So that's generally what I do. I just take the rent and divide it by 8
And I figure that's what I have to get on the weekends. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights, I'm going to make my actual profit. So it's a great way to just quickly on the back of a napkin, figure out if property is going to work or not, is just to ask that question, because the weekends are always going to book on Airbnb site.
Well, this has been outstanding, really intriguing and interesting. You've given us a whole new way to think about getting involved in real estate. Really fascinating. So congratulations on all of your success.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
really, this is intriguing. So very worth our time. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate the opportunity. And for anybody out there who wants to learn how to do it, you can check us out. Go to freebnbcall.com. Or if you want to learn about other things that I do, you can go to brian.page. That's my website, brian.page.
Well, Brian, again, thank you so very much. And I hope we see you out there.
Thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Brian Page. I believe he's got, again, a great opportunity for you. If this is something that you want to move into as a part of how you might want to invest in the future, Brian's got it figured out. So this is an interview you might want to revisit a couple of times. Thanks for being here. Next up, James interviews Pamela Bardy. You might have heard the expression, well, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And that's kind of her story. She went from delivering pizzas to building a real estate empire. So I want you to do that also. That's why you're here. This is what you want to learn about. She's an inspiring story. She's got a lot of wisdom and experience. She's someone that's been profiled in big national publications, and now you get to enjoy her here. So let's lean in and learn from this interview with Pamela Bardy.
Pam Bardy, thank you so much for joining us and being part of Hacking Real Estate. I've been so looking forward to talking and meeting with you.
I've been looking forward to it as well. Oh my God, this is so exciting to be here with you guys working on this. Real estate gets me pumped up, so I'm like, let's go.
Excellent. Well, your story's pretty fascinating, right? From delivering from Albania, pizza restaurants, delivering pizzas at 19 to multi-million-dollar real estate empire by 27. Who are you? How did you do that?
Absolutely. That's the story that everyone asks for, right? It's the true American dream underdog story. So pretty much, I'll give you a synopsis of my life story, if you will. So I came to the US when I was about 5 years old. My parents won the visa lottery to come to the United States of America. And so they came here with nothing. They had no family, no job lined up, no living circumstances situated, and like nothing, and didn't know how to speak English on top of all of that. And so my dad started working all types of weird jobs when I was growing up because he couldn't speak English. So he was doing like manual labor and all these different things. Eventually he got into restaurants because my little brother was a newborn when we came here and I was 5. So essentially he got into the restaurant business. His mentor actually became like his best friend in it. Like the owner of the restaurant became like his mentor. And essentially he ended up telling him, Sokol, the way you build wealth in America is one of 2 ways. Rule number 1, own your own business. Rule number 2, own real estate. And my dad was like, well, how can I have the bandwidth to do any of that? Like I just came here a few years ago. And he's like, I'm going to give you a down payment to go out and buy a business. So he did. So my dad went out and bought a business. I started working there when I was 10 years old, not because of child labor laws, not because my dad forced me, but I just wanted to hang out with my dad. And so that kind of brought me into the business world at a very young age. Like I was exposed super young and started jumping in as a cashier and all of that. And so by the time I was 18, I was running the show for my father's restaurant. By the time I was 21, I jumped into owning 2 of my own restaurants, but then I was doing his on the back end still. And so it was a really interesting experience. And when I had my 2 restaurants after I graduated my undergrad, and I was still actually in continuing school after that, I said to myself, what? I need to start building a different stream of revenue because I had gotten into so much debt with the restaurants. And so that was around the time, it was like 2012, 2013, when all the flipping shows started becoming super big and HGTV was blowing up and real estate investing was becoming such a thing. And I said, I just want to flip one house, maybe a year, maybe 2, start building a different stream of income. And what that turned into was me doing my first flip, hiring a coach, doing my first flip, making almost $100,000 on that. Got addicted to that, as most real estate investors would, right? And then stepped away from restaurants and then just started building on that, getting my general contractor's license, becoming one of the youngest females in the state of Massachusetts to do that, and then building out a brokerage and then the development company. So that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. By 27, I was financially free. I had made it to Forbes and Time magazine, and it was just a crazy, crazy ride up for sure. So that was my underdog story in a nutshell, if you will. That's what I like to call it.
It's fabulous. So, real estate, I mean, was that seed planted in you early on when your dad's mentor friend told him, own a business, own real estate? I mean, to go from making pizzas, which really is one of God's chores, making good pizzas, to jumping in and doing a flip. Where did real estate come from?
Yeah. So at my restaurants, I actually had this group of real estate developers that would come as clients to my restaurants. And I was like, what do these people do? Like, they just seem to do whatever they want, whenever they want, live financially free. Like, what, because I was used to hustling 14, 16-hour days, owning two restaurants. That's kind of what happens. And so I was asking them, what do you guys do? And they started telling me about real estate investing and making your money work for you and all these concepts that, as an immigrant, you're just, you're used to working for your money. You're used to active income, like having to work for it. You don't get introduced to these concepts really too often. And not only that, but they don't really teach it in school. So it was the first time I had been exposed to that. And that's when I started challenging myself that, hey, I want to build a different stream of revenue in real estate by doing this, by flipping houses. That was like my first thing. I was like, I just want to flip. That's all I want to do. Because there's 1.5 million different avenues in real estate, right? But that was the one that I really, really wanted to focus on. And so that's what I did. I went to every seminar, every educational thing you could possibly imagine, and basically ended up hiring a coach. And then that's how I dove into the business. But yeah, it was very construction heavy. I didn't know anything about construction, nothing going into it. Made a lot of mistakes, but here we are, made it through the fire, and we succeeded. So that's kind of how it happened. Really, that's how the introduction happened. I mean, I think that seed was absolutely planted a long time ago, because I remember mentioning it to my father. I said, Dad, I'm really interested in adding real estate into my portfolio of businesses, because I think, having the restaurants and just having something different and diversify my portfolio would be really great. He was like, Pam, that's exactly, he's like, remember the two things that my mentor told me, because my father's mentor had passed from cancer. So he always remembers those two things: owning your own business and owning real estate. He's like, I think it's the smartest move you could ever make. And so that's how it all happened.
So you hired a coach first?
I did. What I started realizing after getting into all the seminars and all of the things, right? So trying to figure out what it is as an outsider looking into the real estate industry, you get kind of confused. You're like, where do I start? It's overwhelming because there's so much information, and it's like, what is step one? Like, tell me logistically, because I have a business brain, right? I'm in the restaurant world. I can multitask and do 1,000 things at the same time. But what's my first step logistically, not just the theory? And so what I realized was the most important thing to realize is that real estate is a local business, and that if you wanted to start real estate development, that you needed to work with somebody in your market that knows exactly what the market's like, what the construction process looks like, has all the contacts, all the lending options, things like that. So that's why I hired a coach in my market specifically to start.
Good. I want to get to that. But let's start a little bit earlier. You started going to seminars. And how did you find these? Yeah, where did you start looking to find these seminars and classes?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So this was around 2012, 2013. Again, at the time that flipping really started going mainstream, if you will. So there was a bunch of seminars happening in Boston that, like Fortune Builders was coming in. There was like 1 million different types of companies coming in to teach these seminars, learn about real estate investing and all that. And so I started going on like meetup.com and on Facebook and seeing what everybody was doing, biggerpockets.com, and kind of exploring what events are happening that I can meet like-minded people who are doing this or who want to do this that can help me on my journey. And so that's how I started going to absolutely everything I could, even while managing the two restaurants at the same time. It was an interesting journey, but I was diving in it and I said, I need to learn everything there is to know about this. I'm determined to flip a house and build a different stream of revenue for myself. And that's really how I looked at it for a while. And then after I finished my first flip, it was like, okay, that's it. All hands in real estate. I'm done.
Do you remember any particular one or two seminars that really inspired you or sang to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, Fortune Builders was a really, really good one. It was like a 3-day intensive that we did. And that one was it was at the Boston Convention Center. It was almost 10 years ago. So it's crazy. That was almost 10 years ago. But yeah, I remember being there and just like learning so much and diving into so much and just learning the whole process in and out was really, really interesting to me because for me, it was like learning a very foreign subject, if you will. And I was just so fascinated by it and also the limitless opportunity and flexibility that it provided. So that definitely was a big one for me. And I just said, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to hire a coach and we're going to rock and roll. And it was honestly the smartest thing I ever did because again, being in debt, I had my family that was going to invest in these projects. And what's the best way to mitigate risk is to bring in the best people who've been there, done that, so that way you can move forward and know that you're safe. And so it was the best investment I ever made. Yes, it was an upfront cost, and I was like, it was a little painful, right? But in the long run, it's made me millions. So I think it's definitely something to be said about that. Upfront investment, but in the long term, always invest in those relationships. I think it was the smartest thing I did throughout my career.
Sure, it's really a relationship business, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
How'd you find your coach?
So I actually started looking in the Boston market because I was saying to myself, I need somebody who's local, who's here, that knows the lenders here. And I need, someone that I can call on or text or email very quickly and get back to me within minutes, right? Like that's because of my restaurants and I didn't have much flexibility when it came to time. So I basically found him when we were at different seminars and he was showing me what he was working on in the city of Boston. And I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. So let's see what we can come up with. And that's what we did.
Oh, all right. So somebody didn't just hang a shingle, real estate coach.
Right. No. So we had met at a few different seminars and essentially we just had a lunch and he told me what he did, that he was a real estate coach. He's a real estate investor himself. And so basically I was asking him, do you do mentorship? He's like, yes, I do. I have a whole program that I launched there. And so off we went.
Nice. One of the things I love is there's so many, as I call it, there's so many spokes on the real estate wheel, yes. Right? But why flips for your first one? You got your coach and now you decided to do a flip.
Yes. So he specialized in flips. And I wanted to do flips because I loved the process, the ideology of creation, the fact that it's almost like the property is like your canvas and you create something for the future, right? So for me, doing my first project, I remember I drove by it and it took me like 30 minutes to find it. I'm saying to myself, where is this place? And so what happened was the house had overgrown so much that the bushes, we couldn't even see it. I was like, what is going on here? And eventually I found it. And I remember, there was a huge depth to real estate development for me as well. I think that's why I was so pulled to it. I remember that specific project. It was a family. So it was an older couple that got sent to a nursing home. And so the children were ahead of the estate. And so they were trying to figure out what to do with the asset, with the property. And so I had put in the offer, we moved forward with that. And they were saying to me, Pam, the one thing that we ask is that you bring the property back to life the way that we remember it and the way that we grew up in it. And I hope that you can do the same thing for a family moving forward. And so that to me, I remember hearing that for the very first time. It was like, I knew there was a reason why I was pulled to real estate development because there's a much grander purpose that we have in this life to create places that create memories. And that I think is extremely important. I remember I kept that in mind. And I remember that when the open house came about and the house was completely finished, it was gorgeous. It was staged. It was stunning. It had cathedral ceilings and just gorgeous. And I remember the family that actually ended up buying it coming in and just watching them interact with the space, I think was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I just remember that feeling of like, wow, I created this place for somebody. This is incredible. So to me, it was a level of fulfillment, not just on a monetary level, but also on a passion level and like a soul level for me. I was just saying to myself, this is magical. This is what it's all about. It's not just the money, but what about all the contractors that were paid here that now get to feed their families because they worked on this project? What about this new family that's coming in? And now to this day, 10 years later, I still drive by the family's still there. They're still there. And it's just magical to me. And that's what real estate development, I really think that's what it's all about. But I was really pulled to that front and I didn't know why. It was flips. It was like real estate development. That was it. I just want to do one project or two, because at that time, 2012, 2013, there were still leftover deals from 2009 and 2008 and all of that. So there was a lot of opportunity still in the market to do things like this. So that's why I kind of wanted to step into it. And because it felt like something that had a process and I had the coach and I had everything down. So it was like, why not try it? It's just a different stream of revenue. But then when I got into the process, I realized I love this. Not just obviously monetary, it's amazing, but on a soul level. So
I love your passion. So how did you find this first property?
yeah. So this property, it was interesting. So it was a wholesaler that brought us this deal. So for those who are watching that don't know what a wholesaler is, it's somebody who gets a property under contract and then assigns the contract to an end buyer, like somebody like me, a real estate developer who's actually going to take it, buy it, renovate it, and then sell it or hold it and refinance it. And so that's exactly what I did. It was a gentleman who came across this property and he told myself and my coach about it, and we jumped in, bought it, and it was awesome. It was a great deal.
So how did he find you?
Facebook, the power of social media, right? So when I started getting into real estate development, I told anyone and everyone. So my parents had a restaurant up until this year. So we had a lot of contacts. Like it was even to the point of putting my logo with like a QR code and like I buy houses, call me, like on pizza boxes. That's how deep the passion went. And then on social media, I was always posting like, hey guys, I'm getting into real estate development. If you know of any properties, please let me know. And I joined every group humanly possible and all the networking and all of that. And that's how I ended up finding the deal. He messaged us and said, hey, I have this interesting property in Stoughton. Would you be interested? And I said, yep. That's the next town over from where I graduated my undergrad. So I know that area very, very well. So lo and behold, it happened. It was awesome.
And that's something any of us can do, leverage all the people we know. You're putting something out there that's just value added, and all of us can do that when we decide to get into this space.
Absolutely.
So your steps, and I take it you highly recommend all this. You went to seminars, all the learning you could, found a mentor. And I hear that with so many people that we've interviewed. They all have mentors. And so many of them have read Kiyosaki's book. That was like their first thing, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Have you read it?
Yeah, of course. It's like the real estate Bible. If I hadn't read it, I'd be in trouble.
Yeah. So you found a coach, and then you just put your name out there. Because that's the other big thing. So I want to get into this space. How do I go about it? And I've heard that from so many of you that take advantage of all these gatherings. And finding the gatherings was pretty simple.
Yes. Surprisingly, yes. I literally would just go on my beautiful friend Google.com and real estate investment events, Boston, Massachusetts, and literally everything that was tied to that, I was going there. I was in there. And then I would also, because I got my real estate license as well, I started searching up public record of like LLCs of investor properties that were owned. And I used to call them for advice. And I used to say, hey guys, saw you guys bought this property here. Super interested to see what you're doing. You mind if I just like come and shadow you for a day or come check out your project and see what's going on? And that's exactly what happened. I mean, one of my biggest inspirations in the real estate game is actually Cindy Stumpo. So she is a powerhouse developer here in the Newton Brookline area in Massachusetts. She had her own TV show with HGTV called Tough as Nails. And she is tough as nails. She is a contractor and she is amazing, but she builds mega mansions. Like she doesn't build anything less than $2 million. And I remember going into her office, and she wasn't my coach, but I had someone separate for that. But I remember stepping into her office and just saying, "Hey, Cindy, I know you don't know me, but I'm incredibly inspired by you. And I love you and I adore you. And I hope this doesn't freak you out." And I just remember she just comes, gives me a huge hug. She's like, "Honey, anything you need, I'm here. Like whatever you need." And literally to this day, I could call her, text her, email her with anything. And she was like, "Call this person, do this. Here's a recommendation. Here's that." So don't be afraid to call on people, especially even those that you admire. Even a friend of mine, Dave Seymour, who was basically one of the TV show stars of A&E's hit TV show Flipping Boston. He was unbelievable. He flipped houses in Boston. That's what he did. He was a rehab. And I remember reaching out to him and saying, "Hey, Dave, saw you on A&E, saw your show. You're awesome. Like just, here in the background cheering you on." And he's like, "How are you, Pam?" So it's like these connections that you just don't think, if you start looking at your role models and you just reach out to them. There's nothing wrong with building those connections, building that network. I like to say real estate has the most incredible people on planet Earth. So take advantage of those relationships. And if you're an awesome person, just like doing your thing, everyone, and you bring the right energy and you're not trying to take from people, I think that brings a whole new energy whenever you approach someone as well, because that's how I was able to build and leverage these incredible relationships where I could just, anything I needed, I could count on anybody to help me out. So I think that's a huge thing for anybody who's starting. I think that you feel like you're in this silo of your own and it's big and it's scary, but really it's not. If you understand that you're supported by so many people, it's going to feel easy for you. So just don't be afraid to build those connections. I think feeling alone is like the scariest part, and like you're taking this massive risk all by yourself, and it's like there's so many people you can call that can help you.
Yeah, I think that is a big thing for a lot of us, right? It is that's it's oftentimes the biggest check you're going to write, so it feels very risky. So pull the trigger on some of this stuff. But like I said, it's so apparent in talking to so many of you that real estate is a relationship business.
It really is. It really is. But at the same token, you think about this, that we sign up for university and college without hesitation. And it's, why wouldn't you invest in coaches? They're like professors, if you will, just in a different type of game, right? So why not invest in them as well, the same way you would college? I think if people start to flip that mindset a little bit, a lot of things would shift. Now, no matter what I'm most interested in, I hire a consultant or a coach in that field, because I'm like, I don't want to make their mistakes. First off, I don't want to lose time and I don't want to lose money, and I'd rather hack the best systems to be as effective as possible. And I've learned that throughout my journey. I suggest it to everyone. I'm like, it's the smartest business move I've ever made. Terrifying in the beginning, right? But so well worth it.
Well, you're obviously jazzed about it. So still every day, your passion comes through. I started listening to your podcast. You're a lot of fun.
Thank you. Oh, we have fun on that. Oh man, we'll have that recording next for sure.
All right. So back to, I'm still in the first one. I love, take advantage of all the seminars, all the gatherings, make relationships, find a mentor. I hear that repeatedly. And then finding the deal was, you just put yourself out there, right? Which really didn't cost anything, except maybe the pizza boxes. But you just put yourself out there, and through connections, and then you got your first flip. That was a big property, right?
Yeah.
It sounded like you jumped in with both feet.
I sure did. I started getting very confident. So there's this one thing with me that I'm very spiritual and faith driven. So I know whatever I put my mind to, I'm like, the universe has got me. I'm all set. Like, I just need to put in the work and here I go. Right. But the one thing I think that was really powerful for me was actually writing down everything that it is that I wanted. Right. So when I hired a coach, I actually wrote down, I want to buy one single family house this year and I want to make $100K profit on it.
Wow.
So, and I wrote that down. I not writing it down on iPhone, people. Like I'm saying, writing it down, like physically taking a pen and paper, write it down, and just like actually write down what you want. And I think that that's the problem with step number one, because this is the hardest step. truly. To manifest anything, step one's always the most difficult, right? So how do you make that a physical reality? You write it down. You ask yourself first, before you do anything, what is it that you want? Because if you ask most people, they don't know the answer. What is it that you want? Financial freedom. Okay, great. So then how are you going to get there? What's your financial freedom number? For me, I was like, you know what? I want to shoot for the moon. Let's do 100K this year. Make a salary of my own, right? And then kind of exclude the restaurants that I had at the time. And so that's exactly what I wrote down. I said, I want to buy one flip to make X amount this year. And that's exactly what I did, right? So ask yourself what you want, put it down on a pen and paper, and then watch the magic work. Because then you got to write down the logistics of how are you going to make that action item actually happen. You have to take action. You can write it down and think that the universe is going to magically manifest on its own, but that's never the case, right? It takes some action. So that's getting through that analysis paralysis that most people get stuck in, and that's step number one. That would be my biggest piece of advice, because that's literally exactly what I did. After I was clear, this was my path. It's like, okay, then how do I integrate this in my life, and how do I execute and make it happen? So I get a lot of questions on the first step, and that my friend would definitely be it.
Well, yeah, and shooting for 100K on your first flip, that's big. I'm just worried, like, what'll happen when you get over this shyness of yours? It's going to be scary.
I just have fun. That's I just remember, I was like, you know what? I was led to this for a reason. I listened, and I think about it to this day, had I not, right? One of my biggest quotes is, regret is far worse than fear. To me, what petrified the life out of me was to think that when I was like 50, 60, 70, 80 plus years old, and like looking back on my life and saying, I wish I did this, that horrifies me, right? Yeah. So even because I'm not gonna lie to you, I was scared in the beginning. I was like, listen, I have 2 restaurants. This is a lot of risk. This is a lot of time. Like, I don't know if I can do this. There was all this self-doubt and all these things. And I just remember tuning in and just saying to myself, Pam, there's a reason you're being drawn to this. Go and try it. If it doesn't work out, oh well. If it does, but what if it does? Right? And it did. It grew this entire life that I just could have never, ever imagined. Right? So what if? That what if is huge.
I really like that. Resonates with me, that regret is worse than fear. Wow, that's powerful. All right, so you knocked it out of the park with your first flip. So you're now jazzed. You're ready to do the next one, right? How'd the next one come up?
So the next one came up because I kept on posting about what I did on the first one everywhere. It was like, hey guys, I would literally film myself going into my projects, and I'd be like, hey guys, so today we're doing all the electrical work. Like, check this out. And then I'd be showing all different things of what was going on there. And I was just posting consistently project updates, and all of my friends, family, associates, everyone that knew me were like, wow, Pam, that's really, really cool. If we hear of something, we'll let you know for sure. And so that's how my deals started happening, was all word of mouth referrals. They're saying, hey Pam, I have a friend, whose parents want to sell this property. Can you go and take a look at it and see what you can do? And I'm like, great. One of the most important things that I ended up doing was choosing my locations as well, because as I got into flips, I started deeper. I started realizing that different projects, if they're too far away, there's a lot of inefficiencies that can happen. So I just chose 2 cities within Boston that I decided this is my arena. This is where I want to be. And so once I started doing that, once I even got even more hyper focused on the locations, then I started becoming even bigger in that world, because I would tell people I'm looking in West Roxbury and I'm looking in Rosendale and Boston. Those are my 2 areas. If you know of anything that comes up here, let me know. And lo and behold, it just kept happening. So it just snowballed. It just snowballed through word of mouth, Facebook, talking to different agents, real estate agents that knew what I was doing, things like that. So it was all in the relationships.
I like it. Yeah, you didn't need a marketing budget to get started. All right, so you weren't in there with your tool belt and your Sawzall doing all this, right? So you had to hire cruise, right? Teach me how do I avoid pitfalls, but because this is a big part of it.
Oh my goodness, you said something so key when it comes to flipping projects, which is what nobody, like in the seminars and everything that I went to in the very beginning, they weren't really heavy on the construction part of things. Now, the thing about it is construction is everything. A flip is a renovation project. If you don't know construction, you may be in a little bit of trouble if you don't have somebody who knows what they're doing, which is why the coach for me played a gigantic role because I didn't know what I was doing in construction. I was like, this is a whole new world. Like, whoa. But the coaching basically taught me the whole construction process and how to deal with construction management and then also the whole sequence of events and logistics that comes with the construction process. So I never knew like what goes first. Like, okay, we demo the walls, and then what do? Then after that, who comes in first? Okay, the plumber, and then it's the electrician, then it's the HVAC for the heating and cooling systems. It took a while to understand what comes first and like who frames and who does, there's because it's a whole collaboration of different contractors that you're working with because what happens is the plumber's not going to do the electrician's job. The electrician is not going to do the plumber's job. So you have to project manage and coordinate with all of these people. If you're the general contractor, which most developers are, or they outsource it to a GC, a general contractor, who manages all of these people, which is what I would recommend so that you can save your sanity, right? But if you're ready and prepared for that, 100% go into it. But there's a whole process and a whole strategy that I have in dealing with all of the contractors. So the thing is, you've got to line up the most important from the very beginning. So when I first started, I actually didn't know anything about anything in construction. Like I was saying earlier, I knew nothing. Literally, I remember this moment distinctly, walking into my project and my electrician's asking me, "Oh, Pam, do you want the flush mount in this room or that room?" And I'm like, is a flush mount. And I didn't tell him that. I was like, oh, hold on a second. I have a phone call. I literally went outside and I Googled what is a flush mount fixture. And it's just like a regular light that goes into a room. You just plop it in, right? But I didn't know what I didn't know, right?
Sure.
So you kind of have to learn as you go a little bit, but that's where the coach comes in too, where they help throughout the process when it comes to that, especially in the first couple of deals. But I think the most critical thing is finding contractors that are very good at what they do, very good at what they do, because the biggest lesson I learned in construction, and I will tell you this and I will repeat it over and over and over because this resonates with business and really anything in life, you always, and I mean always, get what you pay for. I cannot say that enough. Don't go with the cheaper contractor just because he's cheaper, right? Pay attention because then how does the finished work look? How does this look? Are you going to have problems with them? Is there going to be delays in the project? I mean, there's all these things because essentially what you have to do when it comes to construction is build a whole timeline of like, okay, here's when we start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here's everybody I'm going to plug into the process. And that's what's going to get us to the finish line. And then you've got to coordinate everybody in between. And as the developer or the investor, whether you're the contractor or not, you should be aware of all this so you know where the project is at all times and what's happening, right? And the key is to create a team that you can take that and execute it over and over and over and over again, which is what I ended up doing because I built one team and then we started doing a bunch of projects and I was able to move contractors around, which was really awesome. So, and they knew each other, built the relationship and all of that. And I would say in terms of morale and how you motivate contractors, because again, I was 21 when I started, right? So I was a young female dealing with a bunch of guys, right? So a lot of people ask me, Pam, how did you gain the respect? Well, first off, you show up. Second off, you know your stuff. And third off, you treat them like family, right? There's a law in the universe called the law of reciprocity. And when you give, you will absolutely receive right back, right? So if you're pouring out love, that's what you're going to get back from them. If they feel appreciated, loved, supported, they're going to want to work for you and do that tenfold, right? Because sometimes, it can be a hostile environment. There's a lot of guys, there's a lot of things going on, it can get tense, there's a lot of tension, people fighting sometimes, right? There's just all these things that can happen in construction, right? But if they know that the person that they're working for appreciates what they do and takes care of them, I think that takes everything to the next level. But there's a whole process when it comes to construction and all of that. And a great general contractor will have a team that kind of duplicates every single time, no matter where they go.
So you found a general, you hired a general contractor?
In the beginning, yes, one that had a whole team built out. I asked, and that's one of the biggest pieces of advice that I would give is find somebody who has a team, right? But that they're all outsourced. You want to work with a lot of different subcontractors. If you have one contractor that says they can do everything, that is a serious problem, because not only is that going to take you forever, but then some things could be sidestepped because they may not be licensed in everything, right? So just be very cautious with when it comes to that. But there's all kinds of apps and different things and word of mouth referrals that you can get for contractors these days, which is amazing. There's apps like Thumbtack and all of that, where you can see the reviews, see pictures of the work, things like that. That's really critical. And then of course, word of mouth, right? You drive by a property, you're like, wow, that's gorgeous. Who remodeled that? Knock on the door, or if it's a neighbor, say, hey, who did that work for you? And just connect that way. The trades are very interesting to deal with, but there's a lot of hacks in working with them to make it efficient and profitable. So.
You scaled fast. So you finished your first property, hit a home run, got your second one. How long did it take before you got your second one?
I want to say we were about to put the first property on the market before we started jumping into the next one. So yeah, it got interesting real fast.
You were all in. And so how long did it take you to get 10?
I want to say 4 years.
Wow.
4 years or so. Yeah. We were cranking. Yep. Absolutely.
What are the biggest things you learned?
Oh man, get what you pay for. Treating contractors like family, essentially. Anyone that you're working with, treating them like family and kind of respecting them and learning what's important and what matters to them, right? So I think that the verbal language is really, really important. I think that's been one of my keys, because most people are like, Pam, how do you deal with contractors? How do you get them to show up, first off? And then second off, be loyal to you to continue to work with you on all of these projects? And how do you keep things going? It's like, well, you have to understand what keeps them motivated, right? And you appreciate them and respect them and love them, then they're going to want to work with you consistently. You pay on time, all these things is super, super key. So there was just so many things in terms of the construction process that I learned how to hack, and like the whole system of it really has transcended, because I now have a whole formula of how that's done in the most efficient way possible, right? Because when I first started, I kind of had it through my coach inadvertently, but then I had to really learn and do it myself to understand kind of the process. And my formula is very construction intense because of the whole project. If most people, that's where they lose their shirt. Most investors, that's where they lose their shirt, is 100% in the construction cost. If you underestimate, which is often the problem, the construction costs on a project, that is a huge problem. Because that's how you can lose your shirt. I've heard people losing 20, 30, 100K, 200K, like crazy numbers. And I'm like, who did your construction numbers before you jumped into that project, right? So I'm always looking to mitigate risk, and the construction costs are always huge, because whether it's, you buy something and you're going to flip it and sell it, or if you're going to buy something and hold it for the long term, it's key to know in any real estate investment. Anything that you add value to often means a renovation, right? So whether it's a 100-unit complex or one single family house, the framework is still the same. But you better know those costs at the end of the day, because that can eat you alive at the end of the day if you aren't careful. Leaving a contingency, I leave 20%. Some people say leave 10, but I say 20%, just in case anything happens that we weren't anticipating, right? Because the minute you open a wall, when you're walking through the very first time, you don't know what's behind that wall. I wish I had X-ray vision that I could, see through walls and see what's there, before I buy any house. But sometimes you get surprises. So you want to make sure you leave contingencies. There's all kinds of things that I learned in the in the game, but now I'm like, okay, I got the experience. I know what we're doing now. Yeah. Got a grip.
So you speak globally, right? Yeah, your podcast is one of the top podcasts also on the planet. Well done. And it is a lot of fun. Listen to it. But help me hack real estate, right? What are the biggest things, biggest pitfalls people fall into, biggest mistakes? And we haven't really talked about financing, like finding the goal, like your very first one. In fact, maybe I should back up. You found your first one. How'd you finance it? You had 2 restaurants, but you said you had debt as well, right?
When it comes to starting really anything new, any new venture, say you're being pulled in the real estate space. What I've found with the most successful people on planet Earth is really, this is the formula to success, right? I mean, there's blueprints, my formula, my course, my book, all that stuff. But I think the number one thing to start with is the alignment of mind, body, and spirit personally. Like, you focus on you. You need to get that down before you dive into anything deeper, right? Because what happens is, I ask people, okay, you want to get into real estate. Why? And they're like, because I want to make more money. I said, okay. And why do you want to make more money? And they're like, so I can be financially free. And I'm like, okay, so what does that mean for you? Being financially free. Okay. Why do you want to be financially free? And I get it. And I really dig deep on this. And this is like the first conversation that I have with people. And then they say, because I want to spend more time with my family, or, I want to help, my parents pay off their house so that they can live freely because they, they've done so much for me over the years. And I said, okay, that's a reason. That's your why. So let's stick to that. Right. And then I look at every element of their life and what's going on. Right. What are your blocks to you, first off? Because if you are not clear, anything I tell you, anything I teach you, anything I do, you're not going to go anywhere fast. It was the same thing with me, right? When you're purely money driven and not purpose driven, you're gonna run into it one way or another, right? So when you think about real estate, make sure that it's a passion. Make sure it's something deep in your soul that you want to do. Like, this is an avenue for you to do what? What is your why, right? So that, I think, is super critical, because what I find a lot of the time, and when people say, people are failing, I'm talking to different coaches and mentors and different people, and they're saying, they're not, it's just not going so well for them. And I said, yeah, well, what's going on in their life? Well, that's the core. Get to the core first. Get to the why first. Once you get that and you're crystal clear, there's no stopping you at that point. You write down and you ask yourself what it is that you want, and then the coach helps you get there, right? Everyone who's been on my team is like, I had one guy who's like 8 days, he had 1 million in deals down. Like, he's just crazy, but like that groundwork, just like you wouldn't build a house on sand, you wouldn't build a business on sand either. So build that foundation. The foundation is you, right? So start with that. Really, really start with that. And then plug yourself into the coaches that are going to walk you through that system to get you to the next level. So when it comes to the financing, luckily my coach had a ton of financing contacts. And luckily for real estate investors, there's this thing called asset-based lending. So they don't really care what your credit score is. They just want to know that there's enough equity in the house that if you mess up, that they're going to take it from you. So essentially building those relationships was really, really key. So for me, when I started using hard money lenders, if you will. So to get that down payment and to pay those interest payments monthly, I had backup, like family backup, to make sure that I had payments for all of that. And that's exactly what I utilized. Bootstrapping, if you will. Every entrepreneur uses it. Friends and family that believe in you, they invest in you, and then just like a bank would, and then you give them their returns and give them their money back, and then rinse and repeat, and you just keep going. That's how I started. Eventually, to the point that I just started using my own money when I had it. Right? It took a little while, but we got there. So that's kind of how I financed my first deal. Was I found a lender in Boston that funded in Boston and funded that deal and continued moving forward. So it's a numbers game, truly. Real estate investing is really a numbers game. If you can understand that, it's everything. Absolutely.
So did you create a contract? Like, when you went to friends and family, and did you create a contract? Like, because you got to formalize it, right?
Oh, 100%. 100%. And I even felt weird taking it. I was like, this doesn't feel right, but I know I'm going to make them their money and then some. So
Yeah.
that, I'm okay with it. Right. So I basically had the real estate attorney put everything together. Like the whole, okay, here's how much you borrowed, like a promissory note, if you will. Any attorney can plug it in and put it together and just work the deal that way. When this property sells, they get X amount of return and so on and so forth. So that's how we did it. But any real estate attorney can help with that. And even, I mean, there's templates online as well too that you can just search up, promissory note, I borrow X amount. When do you give it back? Here, sign. That's it.
I do.
I'm making it sound way more simple than what it is, but just talk to an attorney to be
Yeah.
safe.
Well, some things are simple, but not necessarily easy.
Right.
So you mentioned a time where your back was against the wall, stress, you made mistakes. What were some of those mistakes and how'd you overcome them?
Absolutely. So there was times where because I was so overworked, I wasn't doing proper due diligence on certain projects, right? Due diligence that I should have embedded into my underwriting before I purchased certain properties, right? So because I was so busy, I was like, oh, I didn't do the right walkthroughs or the right estimations of certain things because they took too long, right? So, and then I ended up paying for it in the long run, or taking on projects that were outside of where I want to be, right? But because I didn't want to turn it down, I was like, no, I'll handle it. I can get it done, and just taking on and saying yes too much, that's also another thing. I spread myself too thin. And that's when I really, really felt it, right? So I was growing faster than my team was scaling. And that was a huge, huge problem. And I remember running into it, then, that creates a whole domino effect on everything else, right? If one thing's not going right and it's going to affect this and it's going to affect that, it's going to affect this, especially with everything I had going on. And I remember the most powerful thing that got me through it was being able to call on coaches, mentors, role models of mine, like for example, like Cindy, like I was mentioning earlier, and just my coach, and just saying, oh, putting my ego aside, that was one thing, right? That was one thing. Sitting down and saying, I need help, right? Because as entrepreneurs, some of the time, we're like too prideful to not, right? We're just like, nope, got it under control, because you don't want to seem like a failure. I mean, it's a human thing. We don't want to seem like a failure, especially to our peers, right? So I remember I had to put my ego aside and say, I really need help, or I'm going to really screw things up. Call my mentors, call whoever I can, and ask for support and say, hey, I'm in this situation. What would you do in this situation? And so they'd be like, oh, yeah, I've been through that. Like, yeah, no problem. Here's what I suggest. Here's how I got through it. Here's how you can get through. And I'm just like, what? What just happened right there? Right. It was really, really powerful for me to get that inside scoop of, how do you get through something like that, right? And how do you navigate through tough times? And how do you actually ask for help? And that was something that was really, really embedded with me. And that's the whole reason I started the podcast, to be honest, was I found that there was so much disconnect between successful individuals and just everyone else, right? Because social media makes everything look so perfect in life and that there's no room for mistakes anywhere, right? So I just found that there was a massive disconnect, and that every successful person has really been through the ringer, you know, sometimes many times over before they ever achieve their level of success. And to, basically tap into that and be open and vulnerable to saying, I need help here, right? Because that was a big thing for me. I was always very prideful, just like, nah. And what I found was, not many people were sharing those stories. And that's the reason why I dove into starting the Underdog podcast, because it was just like this massive disconnect I kept seeing. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take the most successful people on planet Earth and just interview them and their real story, right? Not just like the glorified version of it, but the real story. So that's that whole me being against the ringer. That's where that all really started, that passion for, oh my God, I want to be like a resource and a source of help for people in the future. But when I was really in it, that meant everything to me. And that's how I was able to get through, to know that I was not alone, right? Because when you feel all alone and you feel helpless, that's when the worst things happen, right? So being able to have that support and then being able to get out of it and then shine, and keep growing, that was the most powerful thing.
sounds like having your why is solid. You were always able to lean on that.
100%. And to have that support to say, okay, well, look at my coach has been there before too. So it's okay because they got through it and look where they are now. It's fine. It's going to be okay. Right. To know that that's an option, but to know that you're not alone in that, I think is really, really huge. Because sometimes when we make mistakes, we feel like, oh my God, it's just me. This is a me problem. But truly, it's a human thing that we all struggle one way or another. And it's how do you get out of it? How do you lean on others for support? And how do you pick back up and keep moving? So that was everything to me.
Well, let's jump to today, right? The real estate market today, things, and I know everything is always up, down, upside down, but things seem more upside down today in today's world. People are still, real estate still seems like, if not the best, one of the very best ways to create and protect wealth,
Yes.
increase your own freedom, stability, etc. But it's a goofy market out there, right? Rates are going up, properties skyrocketed. I'm in Utah, and watching properties just go up and up daily, and then things are going to auction. People are bidding on things. Now rates are going up. So you got new clients coming to you, want to get into real estate. Still a good time? What are the advantages? What are the advantages today?
So it is a goofy market, like you said. Real estate's up and down. We go in cycles, right? I never really realized how much the markets, not just in real estate, but stocks and everything has a cycle. I learned that when I was at Harvard Business School, and I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting theory, right? And they're like, Pam, it's not theory, it's real life, right? Like, this is actually what it is. And so, you just always have to prepare. The one thing about real estate that's a constant is that real estate investors never, ever, ever lose. Why is it that now that stocks are not doing so great, that hedge funds and all these massive, massive funds are diving into buying single family homes in real estate? I don't think there's a coincidence because real estate is the most solid investment you could ever make in your life, period, right? It's the number one source of wealth for families in America, right? So generational wealth, right? It's always like the home is the most amazing resource of wealth for any family, and that's a constant, and that's been proven time and time again, right? But for real estate investors stepping into this market at this point in time, when the market is goofy, weird, upside down, whatever we want to call it, right? It's a perfect time. It's a perfect time because that just means you buy lower and you sell lower, but your margins should never ever change, right? If you know the game and you know the framework, if you know it's a numbers game. So it's just about being very cautious. Now, what's scary when it comes to this market is if it's shifting and you've over leveraged yourself, meaning you've bought too many properties, you've taken on too much risk, and maybe those properties that you bought may not end up being the same sale price as they were a year ago, right? That's a scary place to be. But for anybody stepping up now, and this is what Tony Robbins references when he says winter, right? What season are you in your business, right? So in the real estate game, and also really just economically, we're entering winter, right? So how are you preparing for winter, right? You get your coat, you get your boots. Exactly. You get your coat, you get your boots, AKA all your training, your coaching, everything that it is that you want to do, right? Because the framework will never change. Whether it's up, down, side to side, if you know your numbers, you're never going to lose, period. Right now is a great time to get into real estate investing. Reason being is because now there's going to be more deals that are available and coming on the market. More people are going to be desperate to sell. You're going to have more leverage in purchasing properties. But again, that also means that on the flip side, that if you're selling it or if you're refinancing for the long term, it doesn't really hurt you if you're buying investment property in the future because real estate tends to always appreciate. Of course, check your market and all the data of what's happened there in the last 10, 20 years. But now's a great time because now there's going to be more opportunities to buy. But again, know those numbers like the back of your hand. And if it's a long-term value, then that's great. That means you can ride it out. You can purchase it now, do a little bit of renovation, put tenants in place, and then hold it for the long term. But when it comes to flips, you have then got to adjust your numbers and get super conservative with what the numbers are now, not what they were a year ago, right? So it's actually an amazing time. And everyone in the real estate investing world is like this. They're like, oh, we're so
Really?
excited. We can't wait for what's coming. And in the beginning, when I first got into the game, everyone, it was just a crazy time. And they were talking about how much money was made in 2008, 2009, like all these things. And now they're all excited all over again because they're like, yep, it's gonna be one of those. And I'm like, oh boy. It's gonna be one hell of a ride coming forward. So, for real estate investors, again, it's you never lose. Just know your margins. Your margins should never change regardless of the market. But that comes into play with working with people with experience, learning the game, learning the numbers, and you'll never lose in that way. But to anybody who's over leveraged themselves and is walking into this market, I just pray you have enough contingency to make it through, that you've calculated and made buffer for, any market fluctuations. Because, for example, I know people who have new construction projects right now that are about to go up for sale, and what I'm seeing in the market is not really moving at that price point right now. So there's, things and incentives that they may have to do in order to get it sold the right way, like lowering the price or offering seller financing and stuff like that. So that's where it gets scary. That's why I always loved flips or long-term holds, because there's not too much fluctuation in the market. When it comes to new construction, you could take one project, sign it today, and you might not have it fully built until 2-3 years from now. So to me, that's risky, right? So flips was like, I'm in, I'm out, or I'm in, I renovate, get tenants, and hold it for the long term. I like to be like as risk averse as you possibly could imagine, right? But yeah, it's an interesting market without a doubt, but there's still tons of opportunity. Now's the time.
All right. Well, we do need to start wrapping it up, but I do want to ask you, you talk about knowing your numbers, right? So key. What are the key numbers?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So numbers are everything, like we mentioned. So here's the most important basics of like flipping, real estate investing, all the things. What are you going to buy this property for? What's your exit strategy? Meaning, what are you going to do with that property when it's done? And I always advise when you're purchasing a property that you have 2 ways out, minimum of 2 ways out of this deal. Either you're going to have an opportunity to sell it or you're going to hold it for a long period of time. So I always like to go in and say, okay, I'm going to renovate this property. Here's what I'm going to do. And then, based on the strategy that I'm going to choose. So what do you buy it for? What are you going to put into it? And then what are you going to sell or refinance it for? Those are the 3 critical components. What do you buy it for? What are you going to put into it? And what are you going to refinance and or sell it for? Right? So those are the 3 most important categories and buckets for you to know when it comes to the real estate investing game, right? So there's all types of calculators and long-term valuations that you can put on properties, right? For a long term, right? You can plug in, okay, here's what my mortgage is, including renovations. And then here's what the tenants would pay. Here's what the rent looks like. And then you can actually create projections over the next 20, 30 years. So you can see what's the long-term gain in tandem with appreciation and see if that's worth it to you. Or if it's worth it to basically just buy it, renovate it, and sell it as well. So you can run numbers kind of both ways. But in the what you put into it, that's where the construction costs come in, the holding costs come in, and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I literally have created all spreadsheets on this stuff. So I'm a visual person. So I have to write everything down and I have to plug in and like see what's going on. What are my margins? So that's something that I do. But those are the most critical components. And, that exit strategy piece is huge too, because you got to know, say you're in a bind, for example, like some investors right now, properties that they purchased or they're creating that's going to come to market, they're not going to get what they wanted for it on the sales side. So can they plug in tenants and hold it long term so that way they don't lose money in the long run kind of thing. So all types of things.
So the hardest number to get right is probably your construction number?
100%. And then also that the valuation at the end, right? So like what's the sale number and what's the long-term hold number and how long are you going to hold it for and things like that. But yeah, what you put into it, that's always super key. Super key.
How do I mitigate those dangers?
Not to plug myself in here, but having those spreadsheets and that formula that I was talking about is being able to plug all of this in so that way you can know exactly where you're at. Because I always advise this. I say, before you ever put offer in on a property, make sure you have your numbers down, because you don't want to go into it, give an offer, and then you're like, actually, I can't make those numbers work. So this is all things you should be doing in advance, so that way you don't run into any problems if and when you do purchase the property. So that whole, like, what do you put into it is the most critical part, right? Because if you take a property that doesn't need too much work and it's a light renovation and all that, awesome, cool. Put that in if you're going to hold it long term. Or if you're planning to do a full gut renovation and sell it or whatever, then that's a whole nother. So just knowing your exit strategy in advance, I think, is really, really helpful. But having a backup in case plan A doesn't go too right, that's super critical too.
Is there anything I haven't asked you that I should ask you? I mean, you're usually on this side. You know, like I said, I've so enjoyed your podcast. So what I miss?
I mean, honestly, I biggest piece of advice, like we said earlier, regret is far worse than fear. And, what is it that you want your life to look like? This is not, this is your life design, and we have the free will to choose our destiny, if you will, right? Some things we're meant to do, but at the end of the day, free will can get in the way of that. So it's, what is it that you really want? Are you happy? Ask yourself all the questions about that foundation that I was talking about earlier. I think that's the most important thing, to be in alignment, mind, body, and spirit. Is after that you can achieve anything and everything, right? So that's just something that I would leave people with, is really write down what is it that you want, and see what makes sense for you in your life, and just make sure that you're in alignment and you can achieve anything, really. Real estate, I mean, when it comes to the industry, number one industry that creates the most millionaires. It's the great equalizer, right? So anyone who's interested in the game, this is the game to be in. And I can be the first one to tell you that I've seen the most underdogs in real estate than I've ever seen in any other industry. It's amazing. So, but it's asking yourself that question of what is it that you really want, and making sure your foundation is solid, and then just taking your life to the next level. That's why we're here, to walk each other home, right? So.
Thank you so very much. What a delight. I was so looking forward to meeting you and chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, that completes James's interview with Pamela Bardy. I hope you learned a lot there. Again, real estate's a pretty big subject, and there's so many different ways to approach it, and Pamela just showed you another way. Thanks for being here. Next, James is going to interview John Maxim. He's got an extraordinary story, an extraordinary origin story, how he got involved in real estate. And he's someone who has a lot of experience, and you not only learn from his successes, but you can also learn from his mistakes, which many times we learn more from mistakes than we do from successes. So, interesting story, actionable content. Let's dig in.
John, thanks for being here. I'm thrilled you're here because you're a real estate expert, and we need expertise. Right, so let's start off with, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do in real estate, your real estate journey, and what got you here.
Yeah, so I work in Salt Lake City. I own a real estate brokerage, a property management company. I own a bunch of rental properties, do several Airbnbs, and then mostly, and what I'm known for is I flip a lot of houses as well. I flip a lot of houses at a time, so I'm usually flipping between 20 and 50 houses at one time. Wow. And all in the Salt Lake market there. But I've done pretty much everything in real estate. I've been a mortgage broker, started out as a sales agent. I've even worked on the other side of a bank, servicing people's loans. And so I've just kind of, over the last 15 years, amassed a lot of knowledge in real estate.
What was your first foray into real estate?
So I had gotten divorced, and I was having money problems right after the crash, and my home was in foreclosure. And I did this internet stunt. I'm sitting there with all these bachelors that lived in my house. They were renting from me. So I guess my first thing was renting to bachelors. And then we're sitting there talking about how, hey, everyone's going to have to move out on Monday because the house is going to auction and we don't have enough money. So I did a little internet stunt. I said, nobody does it like they do in the movies where you do something crazy or dumb to raise money. So I said, I bet if I say I'm going to light my car on fire, if you lend me some money, that people would do it. And it totally worked, actually. It was crazy. In 3 days, it went viral, and this was kind of before GoFundMe's, and I did it on Twitter and Facebook and a blog, and then it ended up going viral. We got on the radio, like all this crazy stuff. And then, so we raised $20,000 in 3 days. And what happened was I get this check, and when they're auctioning off your house, they auction it down at the courthouse. And if you can reinstate your loan or pay what you're behind, they can't sell it. So I show up to the courthouse with a check in hand and hand it to this attorney, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that looks like everything. Okay, we're done." And then like I'm just like, "Whew, I saved my house from foreclosure. This is great." And then I look around and I see all these guys in like t-shirts and shorts and flip-flops, and they're there just bidding on houses like it's no big deal. And it was just like a light bulb went off, and I thought, oh my gosh, these are my people. This is what I need to do. And so I just got into learning everything I could about it after that moment. So
Okay, so before we move forward, did you torch the car?
I did, actually, which is a great real estate story too. I mean, turns out it's pretty hard to light a car on fire legally. So I ended up going out and doing it on public land, which was a mistake, and a little Boy Scout troop saw us light the car on fire. And so I actually got arrested. I mean, if people Google my name, it's man lights car on fire and goes to jail. So I got arrested and spent 2 days in jail for actually for illegal dumping, not even for lighting a car on fire. But it's funny because the arresting officer thought it was so cool that I did what I said I was going to do, that he and we kind of became friends, and I ended up selling him a house later on. So it's it's interesting. It was a fun journey.
Yeah, definitely the most unique origin story.
Yeah.
So I was sitting here wondering,
where's he going with this?
Well, there's got to be some hoops to jump through to torch your car. But,
yeah.
All right, so you saw all these guys bidding on homes, and you went, that's my tribe. So then what were your next steps? How did you become part of that tribe?
I went and got my real estate license, and it was a little slow and go at first, but I remember I flipped my first house. I was just walking actually to the gas station, and next to my house, a guy was in a wheelchair sitting in front of his house. It was an old, run-down, 100-year-old house in downtown Salt Lake, and he was trying to put up a for sale sign. So I helped him put up his for sale sign, and was asking him questions. He's like, "Yeah, I'll sell it to you." And I remember not knowing what to do. I hadn't gone to any courses or seeked out any mentors. I was just kind of figuring it out. And I get it under contract to buy this home, but I don't have the money.
Yeah. What are you going to burn now?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't go to that way because I didn't want to go to jail again. And my mom was kind of disappointed with the whole jail story. But I just kind of, we grow up thinking it's not okay to ask people for money. But I just lit my car on fire to save my house. So pride is not something that I had a big problem with, And so I just called everybody in my Rolodex. I remember kind of being frustrated because I'm calling saying, "Hey, can I borrow $140,000 to flip this house?" And I didn't know anything about hard money loans or banks or any of that stuff. But it turns out there's a lot of money out there, and probably a lot of people in everyone's network that has money that they don't even realize. And after I called probably 100 people, one of them was like, "Oh yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I have a little experience with that, and I'd love to lend you the money." And so that just kind of got me going on flipping and realizing that if I can find a good deal, the money's out there.
All right, so you bought this house in your neighborhood.
I bought the house in my neighborhood.
How much rehab did it need, and how'd that get done?
Actually, it needed a ton of rehab. So then I ended up calling a good friend of mine who had a flipping show on television, Mike Baird.
Oh, Mike.
Yeah, and he was doing Flip Men on Spike TV.
Yeah,
and
he and Doug.
I just said, "Hey, I'm kind of in and over my head. I've bought this house, but now I don't know how to pay for the rehab." And so I was able to talk him into partnering with me and kind of showing me the ropes. And we just split the profits of the transaction, 50-50. And he showed me how to do it and brought the rehab money, and I had brought the money for the purchase, and it just kind of worked out.
It's amazing to me, with everybody I talk to, it becomes more and more apparent that real estate really is a people business.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not even just people in real estate, but like just involving your whole network in what you're doing and being open about it. It's pretty helpful.
So you got the first flip, you got your first property, you were able to flip it, had pretty much a mentor that partnered with you, somebody with a lot of expertise. He and Doug did a lot of properties.
Yeah.
So you got your first property, you flipped it, it worked, right? You made a profit?
We actually didn't make any money.
No, okay. So this is, right, it doesn't always go golden.
So our very first deal, I remember sitting across from Mike, my partner and mentor, and he's like, we didn't actually make any money. And I had staked everything on this, and I was like, well, we just spent 4 months and I was there every day, and this was the only thing I was doing at the time. And it was kind of a blow to me, but there was a lot of lessons that I was able to learn from that. Like, we over rehabbed the property. We overestimated the ARV. There was just several parts of the project that, and Mike, as good as a mentor as he was, he let me make a lot of the decisions, do a lot of things, because he had several other projects going on. We ended up, I say we didn't make any money. I'm pretty sure Mike shouldered probably a $5,000 or $6,000 loss, and he was capable of doing that. And at the time I had nothing, but I just got nothing. And I remember, I had already, in that 4 months, lined up a couple of other deals. And there was a moment, probably the last one I've had, where I thought, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe, what if I lose money on the next one and the next one? I mean, I'm broke. I'm already broke. But I decided to push forward, and I've found that, when you're afraid, that usually means you're on the right track. So I went forward, and the next deal I made so much money on, it was a life changer for me, and this was 15 years ago, and it was $30,000, but for me, that's as much as I had ever made in a year.
Yeah.
So it was great.
So the next one, kudos for digging in and moving forward after that first experience, because that had to be hard when at the end of it, there was nothing in your bank.
Yeah.
So, you've made no money. You're now a few months further along. So how did you find money for that second one? Same thing, pick up the phone?
Yeah, same thing, pick up the phone. And for the first few, that's what it was. It was just really digging in and calling people and trying to get them to help me out and lend me the money. And it worked. And I'm always amazed. And I talk to other people, and a lot of them getting credit cards, and they get hard money, or they pay for a course, and that course lines up money for them somehow. But I think this has helped my business to really scale as big as it is that I found out that just regular people all over have money, but we're kind of taught not to ask for it. Like, it's a frowned upon thing. But if you're just willing to be like, hey, I've got money, and you're genuine about, and I want to take your money and give you more back, everybody wants that, and real estate's a very safe investment. I don't think I knew it back then, but luckily real estate is a very safe investment when you're investing other people's money. And so it worked out really well for me.
All right. So how'd you find the second property?
I found the second property right on the MLS.
So you're now actively looking and investing.
Yeah. Once I kind of figured out the closing process and how that kind of worked, I was just constantly looking for deals.
Yeah. So what went right on the second one?
The second one, I think I took that we over remodeled on the first one really to heart, and I might have under remodeled it, like I barely did anything. But it was a really good market, and I didn't understand a lot about markets back then. But I think the market helped me to get multiple offers. It was a great location, and I just didn't do as much to that property. I don't know if I do that now, actually, to be honest. I probably would have done a little more on it, but I would have made money. But it was, I just learned from the last one,
And then you're off and running.
Yeah.
You're buying properties how often?
That first, I only flipped 5 or 6 houses in my first year. In my first 3 years, probably 5 and 6 and maybe 6 again.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah, well, it was really good. I mean, I was average prices we're making is probably $10,000 to $30,000. So it was a big jump for me. I actually I was going to college at the time. I quit college and just kind of went headfirst into real estate because I saw that I could probably make 6 figures doing this, several years in a row. So
Who's doing the construction?
I did a lot of the construction in the early days.
You knew you had some skills going into this?
No, not really. I'm a big fan of YouTube how-to videos. And so I did a lot of that. I do a lot of reading and read a lot of books. And I remember early on, it was probably my 10th or, in the first 10 or 20 deals, I actually rewired an entire house. And I pulled a permit. I had an electrician come in, but I did all the work, and then the electrician just checked on it, just to save money. I don't do that now because I've scaled up, but in the early days, I was kind of forced to because I didn't have any money, and so I needed to do it as cheaply as possible. And I always tell people, like, you should do as much work as you're comfortable with. I don't know that people should rewire a house.
I was going to say, yeah, a lot of code, a lot of things can go wrong. Right?
That's why you have to have it checked. But do as much of the work as you can early on in the early days, especially when you're young and hungry and kind of figuring things out, because later on you're going to start working with contractors, and they're quick to take advantage of you if you don't know what you're doing, and it'll cost you a lot of money. So for me to be able to talk to a contractor and know that much about electrical and what needs to happen and those kinds of things, it saved me a lot of money in the long run.
So scaling up, you started scaling up really right away.
Yeah, I'm very much a jump in the deep end kind of person. I had been doing this for 12 years. A lot of people would say I was super successful at it, but I was still kind of a one-man show, and I was subcontracting out and doing everything. I remember waking up one day in the middle of the night, and this hadn't happened to me since those early days, but I had a mini little panic attack because I had just bought my 47th house that I was actively remodeling. One-man show, 47 homes, no team, no processes, not enough guys. My average days that I was flipping houses was over a year. I was holding homes for over a year with hard money. I was not doing anything right. So that moment kind of took me a lot longer than a lot of these other guys that you'll probably interview. I'm sure they figured it out a lot faster. I go to this mastermind and they're like 20-year-olds that have figured it out before me. But so it kind of forced me at that moment to, again, I just got to press forward and figure out how to solve this problem. And so I was able to build a team. Like, I already knew how to find the properties and the money. Those two problems, and everyone, there's 3 major problems with flipping houses. You got to find the deals. A lot of people struggle with that. You got to find the money. Other people struggle with that. And then you've got to figure out how to actually rehab them and fix them up. So I almost had unlimited deals and money without ever figuring that part out, on a large scale. And so that's what I've been building for the last 5 years. Is I've got a team of 10 people, and I have kind of a CFO. A COO, chief. I'm not very good at the C words. Chief Operations Officer, who's kind of under me. And then we have several project managers underneath her. The project managers have leads that are on each individual home. And then on those, we kind of, it differs a little bit. And I have an assistant. So on those, it differs a little bit because we do so many houses. Right now we have 22 in right at this moment. Each lead manages a house, but we don't have enough manpower because contractors are really difficult right now to get. And so some of the leads will manage a general contractor that we've just hired, and we're paying them a certain percentage just to get the job done. And then we have subs where our leads manage, and project managers manage the subcontractors, so that we're like the GC, and we actually are a licensed general contractor as well. And we still hire other general contractors just to cover the workload sometimes. And then we have just a couple of on salary laborers who are jacks of all trade that can help us. We move them around from house to house to do all sorts of different things.
When you got started, was this the dream?
I don't know if there was ever a dream. I always joke that I'm the guy that just kind of accidentally fell into real estate and then fumbled my way through it, So
You've done a lot of right things. Considering the first one didn't even make you any money.
Yeah, I've done a lot of wrong things too, and I think that that's been a better teacher than anything for me.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to get into this and follow in your footsteps, what are you going to tell me to not do? What are you going to tell me to do to ensure success early on?
I think one of the things that I see that happens to a lot of people is they think that if you fail, you can't do this. And so I always tell people early on, like, just get comfortable with the fact that you're going to fail and you're going to lose money. Like, I don't know any real estate investor who's never lost money. I don't know any of them. And so I always try to point that out to people, that we've got this idea that if we aren't getting a trophy at the end, that we're not succeeding. And so one of the things that I didn't do very well is I didn't really seek out mentors. I mean, Mike helped me on that one transaction, but then he was off making television shows, and I just barreled forward by myself, and I didn't go to Real Estate Investment Association meetings or do a lot of networking. I just tried to work within my own not real estate network, which was helpful in finding money, but didn't help me to learn how to do things. And so I was just really struggling to figure everything out the hard way. So getting a mentor, I think, is important.
And best way to find a mentor?
I mean, nowadays, watch Facebook and Instagram. It's really easy to suss out the ones who really are doing the deals, because they'll walk you through them on their platforms. So social media is a great place to find them, but you got to be a little bit careful, because there's a lot of pretenders out there who buy Forbes articles and stuff and don't really do a lot of that, don't really do what they're saying they're doing. And then almost every market has a local RIA, or Real Estate Investment Association. Those are great places to go to and start meeting people that are like-minded in doing it. And there's a lot. I always tell people at a RIA meeting, it's kind of the 95-5% rule. 5% of the people there are pretty big players in real estate and know what they're doing. 95% are like you. They're just starting out, trying to figure things out, or trying to sell people who are starting out and figure things out. So find those 5% and latch on to one of them, and they'll let you know who they are. They're there to help.
That's one of the impressive things I've found doing this. All of you successful people are very willing to help.
Yeah.
It's nice.
It's hard, and we got help too, like all of us. Even guys like me who didn't try to get help, I got some,
All right, so we'll back up a little bit, because now you've got process and you have a team, but acquisition, right? I can't flip a house until I find a house. So I've got to find a house, and then I got to finance it. You've talked a little bit about finance, just your Rolodex, but finding places. How were you going about finding places?
When I talk to people and they find out what I do, the question I always get is, how do you find your deals? Like, there's some secret to doing it. And the answer is consistency. So I like to picture, we call it deal flow. So when I take that word flow and picture a river, that's just, the deals are just flowing at me. I'm just sitting there picking them up. But, rivers have tributaries that bring them things. And so I like to, we've got the MLS, and you've got Zillow, and you've got for sale by owners, and you've got real estate agents, and you've got other house flippers, and all these different things, wholesalers. And so I make it a point in my business to spend an hour every day nurturing each one of those tributaries. Just call some agents up. Hey, you got deals. Call some flippers up. Hey, you got deals. Look at wholesalers. Like, constantly nurturing each one of those. And it's amazing to me, because when I track things, I can see that sometimes the MLS is hot and sometimes wholesalers are hot. And however the market's going, if you're always looking at every source and consistently nurturing those sources, your deal flow is going to be there. And even still to this day, I mean, there's other deal sources that I've come up with, like Instagram. Just having a presence on Instagram, people will message me with deals on Facebook and things like that. And so I spend time nurturing that tributary, and I'm still calling MLS deals and things like that. And I found that, one time I bought a house off eBay just because I was looking. Nobody looks for houses on eBay.
No.
I bought a house off eBay. And it worked out, and it was a great deal. And it's just because I'm like, okay, what's another tributary that I need to nurture my river here? What can I do? And I so I'm always looking for new things and trying stuff out. And usually, if you can find a deal, there's going to be more.
Yeah, it's one of the interesting things I hear is that there's so many markets in real estate, that just because some aren't doing well doesn't mean they all aren't doing well. Like those of us on the outside, we tend to think of the real estate market as this one thing, but just because single family homes aren't doing what we want them to do doesn't mean something else isn't.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've done flipping all over the country, and then I finally decided after a lot of trial and error that I like to do it in my market. And I don't really, I've found that it doesn't really matter if it's a hot market or a low market or a down market. I'm excited for all of those. But you have to do things differently in each market, and you have to have this ability to adapt to a down market. I mean, I look forward to a down market like nobody that I know. People are out here talking when's the market going to crash? When's the market going to crash? I don't care, just hopefully tomorrow, right? Because I know that the way that you make money in a down market is different than the way we make money now. And just being an expert in my market makes me not afraid if it's a good market or a down market or an up market. And a lot of people successfully flip out of their own markets or do real estate investing out of their own markets. But I just find that you can kind of master yours, and that it doesn't matter if it's hot or not. You're going to be able to make money if you just do things the right way.
So what do you do differently between a hot market and a down market?
Yeah, so in a hot market, cat's out of the bag. Everyone knows that the market's good, so sellers aren't willing to sell for super discounted prices. Even when you're selling the discounted stuff, it's not as discounted because they know. So when the market's hot, you've got to do a lot more value add to your project. You've got to do bigger remodels. I mean, right now all my remodels are full, massive remodels. So I've got to buy a property that's in complete shambles in order to get a good deal on it, and I have to do this huge remodel to it so that I can sell it and turn a profit. In a down market, I can buy properties because sellers kind of freak out, the market's going down. I can buy a property and shampoo the carpets, for example, and make a profit. And that's I say shampoo the carpets, but that's a real thing. In 2008, 2009, after the market crashed, we were buying homes at auction and just shampooing the carpets and turning around and flipping those. And so the buy is different in a down market than it is in a hot market, but you have to just do different things to the properties in order to realize a profit.
I realize real estate's cyclical, always has been, always will be. But there are some real fundamental differences between now and '08, right? I mean, in statutes, people have equity, right? People weren't getting loans just because they combed their hair or took a shower that day, right? So there's equity. It's not an upside down market. So do you see a down market?
I do see a down market. I mean, I don't know that I see a crash. But there's lots of down markets that aren't crashes. I don't know that it's a big scary down market, but we've had appreciation for a really long time, and I don't know how long we can sustain that. I don't like to try to see into the future very much because I know that I can make money in any market, so it doesn't matter to me so much. If it turns, it turns, and if it keeps going up, great. I just have to be able to, when I see that coming, I can adapt to it. But I do, if someone was like, well, just give me your best guess, I think we could see a downturn in the next 18 months,
Interesting. So as somebody who just dove in and kept their nose to it and learned kind of the hard way, but you can make money in an up market, down market, doesn't matter. What are the secret nuggets you learned that put you in that position?
That's a good question. So I think an abundance mindset is key, because one of the things I learned doing everything the hard way is that there's always deals. There's always more deals. There's always more money. Time and again, if I ever start to think there isn't, I always find it. It's out there. And so going into it knowing that has been very beneficial for me because, I'm losing my money on this deal. Well, good thing I've got 5 more coming, and I know there's more after that. So that abundance mindset has really helped me to kind of stay positive almost no matter what. I guess another kind of secret is that when real estate turns down, because I went through it, when real estate turns down, it goes slow. I was in the mortgage business when the market crashed, and we knew it was crashing 6 months before it was ever on CNN. You know, people who are doing this every day, oh crap, things are turning, and we could see it, you know, coming. And then when the property values started going down, they went down. I mean, it was 2 whole years before. You know, people always talk, well, everything lost 25%. Yeah, but that took 2 whole years. You know, it's dropping down at like a 5%. Even if it's 5% per month, most house flippers and real estate investors are making more than 5%. They're making 10 to 15. So you got 3 months to solve this problem before you really start to lose serious money. And so that's the other, I guess, thing that helps me to be optimistic is that I've seen this happen before, and it's not like the stock market where I can wake up tomorrow and lose all my money.
Right.
You know, it's a very slow moving machine.
Well, then that's got to create some real freedom for you.
Yeah, because I'm preparing. You know, I'm ready. Like I say, I'm excited for a down market because I don't have to do as much work to flip a house, to be honest. You know, and people always need a place to live.
Yeah. It'll be easier to find those properties. So you said you did go out of state.
Yeah, you know, I've done it all, and so I've flipped all over out of state. There was a while there where we were buying stuff off some websites, you know, where they would do these auctions. They're bank-owned properties that they auction off on certain websites, and so we'd buy them and try and flip them out of state. And
do you remember what took you from your market to going outside?
Yeah, it's just that idea that the grass is always greener, which still gets me in different ways. I just keep eliminating lawns as I go out and try to find new things. And that, you know, that mentality isn't all bad, because for a long time I thought fix and flip is the only way to make money. But now I'm buying and holding a whole bunch of properties. And a lot of time I thought wholesalers were just criminals and horrible people. And now I've added wholesaling as part of my business as well. So that now when I find a deal, I'm not looking at it through the lens of I have to do this one thing. Now I'm like, okay, I can either wholesale it, I can flip it, I can keep it as a long-term rental, or I can turn it into an Airbnb. I mean, there's just so many options now. And that's by taking that the grass is always greener mentality and kind of learning the process. But the trick to that is making sure your lawn's in good shape when you go check out your neighbors.
Well said. I like this. So you get a property, you now have quite a few options with it.
Yeah.
Depending what's going on and
my motto is a deal's a deal. So never say no. I never say no to a deal. And that's a lot of times I can't understand this. I'll talk to other flippers and they're like, "Oh, I'm not taking on any more deals." I'm like, "Well, yeah, but you know it's a deal." And they're like, "Yeah." And there's some wisdom to that because they don't want to overextend themselves. But what they're missing out on is the fact that they've got 10 people in their Rolodex they could call and say, "Hey, I've got a deal. Will you pay me $10,000 if I just give it to you?" And they'll say yes. I mean, so there's always an option. If you can buy right, there's an option, and you should be able to make money off almost every property.
And so now you've even delved into the Airbnb?
Yeah, Airbnb is something I've just kind of accidentally got into. I didn't decide right away, but I got stuck with a property that I couldn't sell. And so it's right in the heart of downtown Salt Lake City. It's a new build. It had lending issues on it. I bought it at auction not knowing that, and so I ended up being forced to turn it into a nightly in order to try and make the rent. And then COVID hit, and I thought, oh no, now I'll never get a rental. And turns out COVID made Airbnb way better than it was before.
It's screaming, right?
It's exploding. And so, yeah, I've added almost 20 Airbnbs to my portfolio since COVID because they're crazy. And what's really neat about Airbnb is you can take these markets, like in Salt Lake, we have these neighborhoods that, like the bias of the local people in Utah are, this isn't a very good neighborhood, it's crime, it's being gentrified. But it's in between the airport and downtown. And so people that aren't from Utah have no idea about that bias. And it's not like, a bad neighborhood in Utah is about as good as any, right? So, I mean, I'm sure this conversation is different in downtown LA or something like that. But these areas that are in between the airport and downtown, they rent for astronomical prices, and so you're able to buy super low and have a rental that pays you 4 times what it would rent for normally, which has a whole bunch of other things going on to it with affordable housing and how a whole bunch of guys like me are turning those into nightly rentals instead of renting them out to people. But that's kind of the way the market's going. And anyway, so it makes Airbnbs a very exciting aspect, which is why we're starting a Airbnb management company now as part of our regular property management.
Will you be managing other people's Airbnbs and your own, obviously?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually pay a Airbnb management company now, and I just don't like the way they're doing things. And there's no competition for that really right now in my market, so we're just going to do it ourselves and try to do it right.
Really, there's not one in the Salt Lake area?
There's only 1 or 2 that I know of, and they're both pretty horrible because they don't have to be good because they just get all the deals.
Right. Well, a lot's coming your way.
Yeah.
So are you actively looking for properties to be Airbnb now, or?
Once again, it kind of goes back to I want to see everything.
Yeah.
I want to see every deal. And then I'll decide if it's, and some are. And so I got a whiteboard in my office, and now we have it as flip, long-term, Airbnb, wholesale. I mean, when we find a deal, we lock it up, and then we figure out where it goes.
What goes into deciding which category it belongs?
Just a number of things. I mean, a lot of times with the flip, it has to do with how where the money's gonna come from to do the rehab, or how the rehab's gonna happen, and how much we can make. And usually the flips are the ones we have to buy the cheapest because we need to make a pretty big margin to go through all that work. Mm-hmm. Whereas a deal that wouldn't work as a flip because we can't buy it as low could make a great rental property where we might be able to do the Burr method, where you buy, refinance, remodel, buy, rent, remodel, and then refinance. So those work pretty good because you still have some equity, but you don't need that extra 10% that you would need to flip it. And so then the nightly rentals, it's something where you can get a good deal on it, but you can make more money than you would make on a normal nightly rental, which suddenly makes it a deal when before it wasn't a deal. So I mean, honestly, the simple answer to your question is math.
Yeah.
Just math determines where they go.
Interesting. Like I said, this is what I've run into. There's so many spokes on the real estate wheel.
Yeah.
Like getting into it. So if somebody like myself just said, "Hey, I want to get into real estate," what questions would you ask me to direct me which way to go?
First thing I'd ask you is if you have any money, and then if you have time. Those are kind of the 2 things. It's oftentimes people will ask me to partner because I've done this, and I break up a partnership kind of on in three ways. Somebody's got to find the deal, and the money. The deal and the money for the deal kind of go hand in hand, but not always. Somebody's got to manage that remodel. I mean, that's a lot of work, so that's another thing. So it's finding the deal, managing the remodel, and then finding the money. And often the money gets split a couple different ways, but those are the 3 things. So if someone wants to get started, I'm going to ask them, if you don't have money, then you're going to need to kind of work on a management. I'll manage it, but you need to find people to lend you money. And so I would maybe have you talk to some hard money lenders, or go to a RIA and start to meet some people that you can partner up with, or you could partner up with me, something like that. If you have money, but you don't want to work, because you get a lot of the investors who've retired, they don't want to go fix houses or manage or pick out tile or, do all that kind of stuff. Then you could be an investor, and you could lend your money to somebody who flips houses like me or anybody. And again, going to a real estate investment association is a good place to meet some of those people, just to kind of lend your money to them. But if you have money and time, then I would kind of guide you on how to find deals, because money and time is all you need. If you can find the deals, then you'll be able to deal.
But would you steer me towards, if I have money and time, would you steer me towards flipping?
Flipping's a great way to make money. It is. It takes some work. If you have money and time, it kind of depends on what you want or what somebody's going to want to do. Because you could just do buy and holds and use your money as down payments and fix those up and hold on to those. And that's going to generate longer term passive income. But if people want to make $30,000 or $40,000 a deal and they've got the time to put into it, you'll make more money faster flipping. So you can make more money faster flipping, but you got to work really hard at it. With buy and hold or even nightly rentals or something like that, that's more of a long-term play where you're not going to make $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 at a pop. You're going to make monthly income.
You'll have cash flow.
You get 10 of those and you make more monthly income, and then they build equity. So those are great vehicles to get into, but that's when I just ask the question, why not do both?
There you go.
Know, why not buy and hold and flip and wholesale? Why not do it all? There's money to be made on every kind. So,
do you still have properties out of state?
I have some rental properties out of state. I don't flip anything. That's not true. I did partner with somebody on a deal in Las Vegas, so I have one going out of state. But I would only do that with a partner who's going to be doing all the management. It just doesn't make sense for me if I can't oversee it, And that's my management style. Other people, I always see in amazement people who are very, that A-type, organized type of person who can flip out of state and not leave a whole bunch of money on the table. There's lots of people that can do that, but for me, I'm not that guy. I need to be able to touch and feel and see what's going on to keep things under control.
Well, it's kind of how you got here.
Yeah.
Was being that guy.
Yeah.
So, John, again, there's so many things. I want cash flow more than I need to make a big check, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want the freedom of cash flow.
Yeah.
Right? I'm getting long in the tooth, so I don't want to have to manage something. So, long-term rental or Airbnb?
Airbnb is a great play. You just need to kind of be careful how things go, because when I first got into Airbnb, I bought 7 properties right away. I got excited. And what I learned about the Airbnb real estate market is that nobody really knows their numbers. And especially when they're like, oh yeah, I made this much and I made this much and I'm making this much more over it. They're just kind of like guessing. They can't tell you how many days it's rented out on average, what their cleaning costs are, all these kinds of things. They're just kind of throwing out their best month. And so and you ask them for spreadsheets and people just don't keep very good. For the most part, I mean, occasionally you get someone who knows exactly what's up.
Because this sounds fundamental.
Yeah, it does, but you'll find that when you're out there, everyone's going to just give you kind of the glossed over, especially because Airbnb is kind of new and people don't even know what the right questions to ask are. And I didn't either. I bought 7 of them, and I only have 1 of those left, and the other 6 turned out to be better long-term rentals than they were nightlies. And that's because of their location, chiefly because of their location. The type of house and their location made it so all the work of furnishing it, managing it, cleaning it every day, all that kind of stuff over the course of 5 years isn't making me any extra money. So nightlies don't always work. People who love nightlies and are selling nightlies are always going to tell you nightlies the way to go. But once again, it comes down to the math and knowing if it's going to be a good deal. But if you can find homes in resort areas, downtown, like urban areas do really well, and kind of vacation spots. I know at our mastermind there was a thing where he's like, I like to buy vacation homes, and those are great, but those are massive, and you're counting on big families or corporations coming in, whereas I prefer to get 1 and 2 bedroom houses that somebody who wants a hotel is just going to use this instead of a hotel for that experience. So I would say nightly is a good way to make a little more cash flow. You just need to do it the right way and know the numbers and make sure that whatever you're getting, they're looking at the numbers correctly.
What are the key numbers?
Well, the key numbers are after management, cleaning, and a maintenance, like how often are you really renting them and how much can you really rent it for? That's a number where when people look on Airbnb and they say, oh, look, the house next door is renting for this much per night. Well, you need to be looking at that over like a 6-month period, because maybe that was just a high month right away. And there's a lot of guessing going on based on what other people are able to rent it for. And then even when you have really good data, sometimes it doesn't pan out the way that you thought it was going to. And so in my Airbnb buying business, I always drop everything by 10% automatically. Whatever someone told me, whatever reports giving me, or a rental analysis of any kind, I just take 10% off it just to keep it conservative, because way too many times it's turned out to be pretty spot on.
Yeah. So you're figuring out the nightly rental. You just hop on Airbnb and look for comparables?
Yeah, pretty much.
I guess that's...
And I keep hearing about software that's going to be coming out that'll kind of report what someone actually rented a space for and things like that. In fact, it may already exist. But for the most part, when someone's giving you a number saying this nightly rental can rent out for this much, they've just gone and looked at comparables on Airbnb or VRBO or some of the other rental sites.
Pulled up
Yeah.
the 1 month.
Yeah, interesting thing that I have learned recently as we're starting to manage these ourselves is that Airbnb is typically, the user is different than VRBO. And the user for Airbnb is looking for the cheaper option, and typically we're going to get less from Airbnb, whereas VRBO is looking for a luxury stay. So if you have a very like updated home or a nice luxury, they're willing to pay a lot more for those. There's just less of them, we found out. So my properties, typically we're getting it like 75% is Airbnb and 25% is VRBO, but we make almost double when VRBO users rent our place out than we would Airbnb.
How do you decide? I mean, what's the distinction between putting it on VR?
Oh, that's really cool. Is there's software where you can just, your place is listed on all of them for whatever price you want. So you can rent it for $100 on Airbnb and $200 on VRBO, and as soon as somebody books it, it's booked.
Same property.
Same property, same night, everything. As soon as if the guy on VRBO is searching, he'll see 200, and the guy on Airbnb is searching, he'll see 100, and whichever one books it first gets it. Yeah.
That's interesting.
And then the software for us or for your management company or whoever will just automatically do that for you and show you across everything. And there's 5 or 6 nightly rental websites, big ones that we know of, that it's listed on all of those.
Will you, as you acquire properties, you're going to try to acquire a little bit more of the high end, the VRBO properties, or?
Yeah, destination. This might be for fun more than investing, but I'm looking at doing a few more destination Airbnbs, which would be out of state, of course. I mean, Salt Lake's cool, but
well, Utah's got so much.
We're looking at one in Costa Rica right now that I would not buy if nightly rental wasn't an option. Would love to pick something up in Hawaii. And the cool thing is, you can have it chiefly be a nightly rental, but anytime I want to go stay there, I just log in and book that, just block it out, and then I can go stay there. So destination Airbnbs is something I'm looking into more. Love to have one in every country,
John,
one of these days.
Congratulations. You've been a delight. From somebody who started by torching his car to pretty much make rent.
Yes,
and get started, and then the first foray into flipping a house didn't really work out so well to where you are today. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
That's a lot. You've given us a lot to chew on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
honestly.
I look forward to staying at your VRBO in Italy. So.
Yeah, let's do that one time.
Well, James, that completes your interview with John Maxim now. You're telling me about this guy, on set, off camera, and kind of what that experience was as he's telling the story. Was it like, were you beyond belief, like that he really did this thing, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's been one of the great things about doing this whole series is everybody has a unique origin story. Yeah. His was off the charts. Yeah. But where he took that, from torching his car to building a real estate empire, is so fascinating. He was great to talk to.
Which goes to show you're only limited by your own imagination. So I'm not recommending you torch your car, but you might come up with an idea that might work. Anyway, thanks for doing that interview, James, and thanks you for being here. That completes episode 2 of Hacking Real Estate. Again, I really sincerely appreciate you being here. I appreciate your time. Our goal and aim is to deliver on a very high level. We have a lot more coming with future episodes, so thanks for being here. It's not too late, incidentally, to share this. Let other people know that they can join, and invite them to come register to watch this during the free viewing period so that they can learn from it too. Also, if you decided that you want to own this particular series, you can do that too. There's information right here on the page to help you figure out what packages might be right for you. Thanks for being here. I look forward to seeing you in episode 3.
And the lie, you learn it from the earliest ages, is it takes money to make money. And you look at your own bank account, your own credit, and you go, I don't have any money. You believed the lie, and therefore you didn't even go look for real estate. The system skills are how to find, fund, and farm the deals. And then finally, mindset skills. You can learn how to do this stuff.
Real estate was very intriguing. I knew that was a way you could create wealth. I'd heard, more millionaires are made through real estate than any other vehicle. Even in a down market, you can make a lot of money in real estate. Even though it's not appreciating, you still have cash flow, you're still paying down your principal, you still have tax deductions, and so there's still a lot of benefits to owning real estate, even if it's going down in value. Most people don't spend enough time learning what to do or what to say, the skills, and then they don't have the work ethic to put that together. I really am so passionate about real estate because I look at it as this thing that's allowed me to do everything else I do in my life.
But I figured if I was gonna have real freedom and real control of my destiny, I need to be an entrepreneur. You can never really become financially free off of mutual funds and doing the traditional investing and planning that people tell you to do. It wasn't about what kind of return of the appreciation of the property. It was about cash flow. Cash flow is what leads to freedom. The income is what matters. It's not about the prices, it's not about the values. It doesn't matter if it's inflation or deflation. What really matters is, are you getting paid regular, stable income? I think everybody should have real estate in their portfolio, but I want to make sure that they get the right real estate in their portfolio too.